without enough facts, and I feel like I'm answering them
Oh,
badly. So I need to know, if you can, like the age of your child, what their disability is, what state you're in. Those would be hugely helpful. So I am from Tollner Law Offices. We're an 8 attorney special education firm. We practice in California, Nevada, and Arizona. If you have an issue in any of those states, we'd love to have a more personal conversation with you. You can go to our website and fill in the forms, and we'll set up the consultation. In the meantime, what we've been doing on Autism Live is teaching all of you stuff about special education legal system, because the only reason that people can't access the system is because it's so acronymic and jargon filled, and nobody sits you down at your initial IEP and really goes over your parent rights. So knowledge is power. And I'm learning with you guys with all the questions. And I'm a little worried today that I might not do the best job of answering the questions, but I'll do, because of the factual aspect that I don't have, but I'll do my best, and we can go from there. You can
okay.
provide us with more information, or you can reach out later and we'll.
Okay. Spectacular. Thank you, Bonnie. So the first question we had that was sent in to us over the weekend is, we are being told that our son's school is going back to in-person in January, and that we will be asked to decide next week if our child will be going back to in-person instruction. We are being told that the question is coming and that we should know our answers, because it will be for the rest of the year. Can they do that? If things get better in April and we want our child to go back, surely we can do that, right? What are our rights?
Well, those are all interesting and very good questions. And I think where we are starting is with the presumption that your child has an IEP and has those rights, as distinct from somebody that's just in general education. My read of this question initially was, oh yeah, they just want everybody to commit for convenience, and then they don't want to have to deal with a bunch of uncommitments when people change their minds. So I don't think they can lock you in, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. One of the things I wanted to say first is the districts are apparently quite busy with everything they're trying to manage, and where I see that is my IEPs that I request aren't getting scheduled within 30 days. I'm not getting records in a timely fashion, and attorneys aren't bugging me about stuff. So if you are feeling same, I think that that's truly happening. Like, I think that they are trying to run the institutions from outside. I think that with respect to every case, if they're doing the right things, it means more IEPs. There's the kind of like the substantive content of the distance learning plan, and then there's actually just the tech aspects of things. So in your case, whether or not school is going to reopen is going to be decided based on health department protocols with respect to the infection rate. And like in New York City, that's changed a lot because the numbers were low, and then they started going up dramatically again. So when I'm talking privately with clients, I tell them to assume that school might reopen in some fashion, whether it's a hybrid model or not, but that I'm expecting, and I hope I'm wrong, that schools may close again. So there could be like several different permutations of what this looks like for your child in your district before this is all over. Now, the distance learning plan is not FAPE and it's not stay put. The stay put that you have is in your IEP. So if school reopens again, your distance learning plan is on the shelf. It's back to the IEP you had, and until you have another one, the last agreed upon and implemented services are going to be the ones that they're required to provide for you. If you do a hybrid model, that would be a little different analysis. I'm not going to go there now, but they don't have any better predictive powers really than you do. And I think if they put something in writing to you and said, you choose, that's it, and it's good for the rest of the year, you would write them back and say, well, I have an IEP, and my understanding is that I have stay put rights, and if school reopens, my program's going to look one way, and if school stays closed, it's going to look another way. but this is making me feel really uncomfortable. So I feel like the best thing we should do right now is have an IEP and discuss where we're at.
There we go. I like that a lot.
24 hours written notice and record the meeting.
There you go. I think that's great advice, and I like it. Moving on to the next one, we are being asked to bring our child in for evaluation for a special new program for at-risk students in LAUSD.
Mhm.
If he is evaluated at risk, they will offer us a half hour of tutoring 2 times a week for 8 weeks. It will be in school, taught by staff. That's all they will say.
Mhm.
What can they possibly accomplish in a half hour? Is this a ploy? If we refuse it as being too difficult, not enough benefit, will it hurt our case for comp ed?
Well, until you said, will it hurt our case for comp ed, I couldn't even tell from your question why, whether you had an IEP.
Well, let
And
me
if
tell you, because I know where who this question came from. There is an IEP,
Mhm.
and we've actually had several people from LAUSD writing in about this, but one in particular that I know of. There are IEPs in this case that they've been asked to come in, and to be evaluated for this, or in some cases I've heard of people saying that they've already been evaluated online,
Mhm.
but they've been identified as being at risk. And
Well, it sounds like LAUSD has some little pilot program, as it so often does. We're going to try to catch some of these kids before they come back to school so that we owe less comp ed. If they're offering you this outside of an IEP meeting, I wouldn't go that route. I would say, I'm happy to discuss this, but if it's going to be in addition to my child's distance learning plan or my IEP, I really need to discuss with you where it fits in with everything else that we're doing. So let's have an IEP meeting. Maybe they got different money for this, and so they're trying to use it to reduce their special education prospective responsibility for comp services. But I have lots of questions. Okay, half an hour a week, that isn't much. 8 weeks isn't very long. At risk for what? Is this a reading program? If so, what are the qualifications and what's the orientation of the program? Is it even geared toward the needs that my child has? So you need a lot more information. And, assume with LAUSD that there's almost always going to be a backstory. Sometimes for fun, I just Google LAUSD terms and things as I'm reading through an IEP, and weird stuff pops up. So um, do a little more nosing around and see what you can find out. But my question would be, how do you feel your child is doing now? Do you feel your child is at risk? And if so, what does your child need in order to mitigate the risk? Do you need comprehensive current assessments? Do you need additional or different services? What you're being offered sounds like a one size fits all, and that's not how we're supposed to do things in IEP land.
yeah.
So
Well,
I
I know from
instinct,
talking. Go ahead.
healthy instinct to be asking questions about now.
For the conversation that I had with this parent, they were saying, and I'm glad that they put it in there about taught by staff, and that's all that they will say, because they were asking, will this be somebody that is special education? Will this be their teacher? And they were saying, no, it'll be taught by staff. And this person even asked them,
Educator.
well, as they were saying, could this even be a substitute teacher, somebody who has no credentials whatsoever? And they were saying, all we can say is it'll be staff.
Yeah, well,
And their point, go ahead.
It could be taught by the PE coach.
Right. And their point was, you know how this goes. I'm being asked to put my child at risk to come into the school. And she said, by the time I bring the child to the school, sign into the office, wait for the person to come and get them, then they walk them back to the classroom. We're not really talking about a half an hour instruction. We're talking about maybe 20 minutes if they get right down to it. And they were saying, what is this Band-Aid? That they would actually like some help and support, but what they want is an aid to help their child while their child is getting instruction,
Right.
not have to drive across town to drop them off for something that isn't going to be that valuable. But they said, if I refuse it, Are they going to, when I come back for comp ed later on, are they going to go, oh, we offered you this?
Well, tell them to put their offer in writing. Tell them that a half an hour a week isn't enough to make a meaningful difference. Tell them that you think a lot more is needed and you're going to have an IEP meeting to discuss what is needed. You know, people, I've become aware in the last 2 weeks that it's really important to not wait to hold IEP meetings. I feel like we ought to be holding everybody's feet to the fire and dealing with the problems now. I think your cases get better if you're meeting with them more frequently and you're saying this isn't working, and then they're coming back and they're offering you more of same. So don't try to be nice or helpful and wait to have your IEP meeting. Raise your legitimate issues now.
Okay. What are the rules of bullying online in the classroom? My daughter is being targeted during class. Girls are making faces, saying things. I feel like the teacher is so overwhelmed. She either can't or won't deal with it. I recorded a class recently. It's bad. What should I do? How can I get this to stop?
Okay. Let's talk about school board policies. Every school district has a school board. Every school board has school board policies. Your school board policies on cyberbullying will be in the school board policies, and you can read them, and they should direct you about what to do about the bullying. Whatever you do, you have to put your concerns in writing. And the issue that I've been aware of in some places is that there weren't policies on cyberbullying, but that was like 5 years ago. So either this is cyberbullying or it's regular school bullying. But either way, I think you write them a letter and you say this is going on, and I've taken some videos and I'm very concerned about this and this needs to stop. What can we do about this? And you might shoot a couple more videos first. Now, it's not legal to do that. I'm telling you to do something that probably I shouldn't be telling you to do, but you've already done it once anyway. Because this is being done over Zoom, I think there's some expectation of privacy. It's not the same as like videotaping in public. But once they hear you have videos, ooh, they're going to get nervous. And you can say, I feel like the teacher's really overwhelmed. That's why I'm going to other adults in the environment and asking them to please step in. But my daughter can't be bullied. It's hard enough to do distance learning without that. And if it doesn't move fast enough, and sometimes it doesn't, then you have to have an IEP meeting. And you can write them a letter, a very graphic letter about what the bullying looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's important not just to let it go.
No, you can't let it go. And also, a bullying claim would be like a personal injury claim. So anytime you want to make a personal injury type claim against a school district for disability discrimination or whatever it is, you need to give notice under the government code if you're in California. California Government Code Section 6250 and the statutes that follow it require you to present a claim against a public entity. It's not difficult at all to do so, and you usually have to get their form. They have a specific form, you fill it out and turn it in. But if you don't make that claim within 180 days, or if it's on behalf of a minor, you can sometimes ask for leave to present a late claim within 1 year. If you don't do that, you are probably going to be precluded from bringing certain types of claims against the district. But you know, bullying should not be tolerated. I'm also scratching my head about where the other parents are when their kids are doing this. I guess it's possible that they're only doing it when their parents are out of the room. But, you know, you probably need to name names and talk about what's going on. These are children. They learn by the examples the adults set. So it's not about them. They're not bad children, but they are engaging in behavior that's bad behavior, and it must be stopped.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as a parent of a student who is in class, a lot of us are not in the room while our kids are in class. Like I'm not in the, I mean, I have an older kid, but I'm hearing from a lot of friends who have even little kids that aren't on the spectrum that they're letting their kids be online in class while they're in another room working. I don't think there's a lot of parent oversight happening.
Well, that would make sense because how would people be keeping their jobs otherwise?
Right. And I feel for the parents that have young kiddos on the spectrum that have taken a leave because it's the only way that their child can
Yeah.
attend. And the parents who are sitting trying to work with their child, having class on the, right in front of them. I've been talking to a lot of autism parents that are doing that. And I'm just like, I don't even know how you're making that happen,
Yeah.
because I don't have the ability to shift focus like that. I couldn't
Agreed.
do it.
Agreed. It was hard enough to do autism triage with all systems go.
Right, right. I love this last question. What paperwork do you ask for when you're looking at a case? So when you're deciding, Bonnie, whether to take a case, what do you wish that a parent had? What paperwork are you looking for?
Well, I'm always thinking that I need to get an outside evaluation paid for at district expense.
Mhm.
In California, the rule is if it's 1 year and 364 days old or younger, I can dispute it. If it's more than 2 years old, I can't. So I'm probably going to want to see those assessments, those district assessments, to figure out how I can attack them to get the IEE paid for, the outside evaluation paid for. If you have any other private evaluations, I want to see that. If you have something from regional center, making the child eligible, I want to read that. And then I want to look at the last 2 years of IEPs. That's basically where I start. And,
Yeah.
I don't have time to listen to IEP recordings, but, when I'm actually listening to one, because I'm drafting a due process complaint, boy, they tell a whole other story. So people, give written notice, 24 hours written notice, and record your IEP meetings every time without fail. If you have a smartphone, you can go in and use the Rev app. It's free. All you have to do when you record is put your phone on airplane mode so you don't get phone calls. Then you can easily email that IEP recording to anybody that you want to share it with. So there's really no reason now, it's not like it was before where you had to order an expensive digital recorder. It's essentially free once you have the phone. We have like maybe 5 minutes left, or 3 minutes, or 2 minutes, or 1 minute,
We've
something.
got 8 minutes, but somebody just wrote in and said my request for IEE was denied. Do you want to take 2 seconds on that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when you request an outside evaluation at district expense, there are only two possible scenarios. One is that the district agrees to fund your IEE request. The other is if they say no, they have to file for due process and take you to hearing and prove that your evaluation that you got the first time around is appropriate. Now they do a lot of stuff that I don't see when I'm involved as the lawyer, but I've been like ghostwriting letters for people and seeing what they get back. So maybe, I don't know, can you tell us what state you're in?
And we'll wait to see if they'll write back to say, I have an assessment, but they won't take it into consideration. But we need to know what state you're in. Are you in the state of California, Arizona, or Nevada, or someplace else? Because if you're in one of those 3 states, let me just say this while we're waiting. If you're in California, they're in California.
Okay, so I suggest in your case that you go to our website and you fill in the form and you have a specific consultation, because it's going to get tricky and I'm going to want to see what you got back from the district. And so we could have a whole program about IEEs. It would be a good idea. They're very important. But I think for now, the district cannot say no and do nothing. They have to file for due process against you. But when parents are involved and they don't know that that's the rule, sometimes the districts just say no and they think they can get away with it. So let's have a further discussion about IEEs, excuse me, and let's see if we can answer some of your questions off the air.
But in the meantime, go to Tollner Law Offices online. You can Google Bonnie Yates Tollner Law Offices, go to their website, fill out the form for the 15-minute evaluation. And Traven just put up the website there so that you can have a further conversation with Bonnie about it and make sure that you're getting your rights.
Okay. Now there's lots of interesting things brewing, and I probably have like 4 minutes left. So
you got 6. You still have 6.
Oh, I have 6. So I'm gonna hit on them and see if any of them is interesting to you. One is the concept of predetermination, and whether a district comes into an IEP meeting with a set opinion a fixed opinion about what they are and aren't willing to do, and nothing you do can change their mind. The problem is, although predetermination is nice if you have it as an issue, not if you have it as a fact in your life, it's very hard to prove. Because what the more skillful evaluators do is they come in and they will go through the motions of listening to you and discussing your point of view. And they will come up with reasons, and they will tie reasons to assessments and discussions. So it is hard to actually prove predetermination, although we know it goes on all the time. Now, this is interesting because LRP, Special Ed Connection, puts something out about how to avoid the appearance of predetermination in remote learning. And I'm just going to quickly hit on the things that they said you're supposed to do so it doesn't just look as if you're going through the motions. Although I think that the fact that they had to write this suggests that there's some concern that they would be. So the first thing they tell educators is watch your language. It's all in your language choice and how you're speaking. Take, for instance, an accommodation that makes sense for an in-person learning environment, such as preferential seating. Instead of automatically saying, we don't do that in a virtual setting, have a conversation about the need you're trying to meet with that accommodation. Then ask how you can do it in a virtual setting. It's phrasing. Come into meetings saying, we can do this, rather than come in saying, we can't do this. They also suggest that you make reference to the student's documents so that it looks as if you are actually considering information that you have and not just making a snap judgment. Check in with the family more often, like how's it going? How are you feeling? And then finally, keep notes and communicate. Have meeting notes of what was discussed and any disagreements. Note the discussion around how you plan to check in at the end of each quarter or semester to see how things are working. If you plan to provide a certain accommodation, take notes of what you will need. Documenting all this and communicating it to the students' virtual educators is key. So anyway, the reason that we have cases that raise the issue of predetermination is because predetermination occurs. So if you have it happen, like I had one client who actually was handed an envelope during her IEP meeting with a prior written notice in it saying no to the report that her outside psychologist was going to present at the meeting. So that's a more clear case of predetermination. Okay, another thing that's hot off the press, unfortunately, is the Capistrano case, which was decided very recently, and it addresses about 6 different issues in district court. But the one that's important for us right now is that for students that are in private schools, because their parents have a faith dispute with the district, up until now, it's been the obligation of the district to schedule an annual IEP meeting every year to meet with the family, even while the child is in private school. Well, the Capistrano case changes that and says it's now the parent's responsibility. If they want to have an IEP, they have to ask for it. So Shannon just made the most appropriate face for what I was describing, letting me know that she understood what I was saying. So here's what I'm saying. Those IEPs are important, and you're going to have to remember to have them. If the district isn't obligated to offer FAPE, you're going to lose the ability to potentially attack an issue and make a case that you need other special education services, or that the district needs to reimburse for your private placement. The way in California up until now is if the district forgot to hold an IEP because the child was in private school and they forgot about him, that was the district's bad, and it had consequences. So this case has now shifted the responsibility onto the parents to hold the IEP. So,
okay. So it doesn't take away our right to have it, but it means that we have to instigate it. So we're going to have to be on that.
Yeah, and that it's troubling, you know.
Yes, it is troubling. And I thank you for updating us on that, and don't let us forget it. Unfortunately, we're totally out of time now, but we appreciate you, and we appreciate Tollner Law Offices. And if people want to reach out to you, they certainly can through Tollner Law offices. And if Traven could, if you could pop that back up there. But Bonnie, we so appreciate you. We're going to be back here. There it is up on the screen, Tollner Law offices. We're going to be back here with you next week. All right.
You will be. That's exactly.
All right. So just want to say, because we got to go, I want to tell everybody, thank you so much for being here. Keep your questions coming in. Make sure you give Bonnie specifics.
Yeah, just remember, the more info, the more helpful I can be.
There you go. We're back tomorrow with one of our best of Temple Grandin. We hope that everybody takes the opportunity to watch that and to exercise your right to vote. We'll be back live on Wednesday with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh here on Autism Live. Don't forget, Dr. Barry Prezant, author of Uniquely Human, will be here with us on Thursday. If you want to, you can go ahead and submit some pre-questions ahead of time. Then on Friday, we have Leah Hirschfeld back joining us to talk about research having to do with autism. I think we're starting to talk about the gastro thing, all the studies about gastro. But until we'll be back live again, as I said, on Wednesday, but Temple Grandin tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. I am Shannon Penrod and we are coming to you live from many different places. And if our backgrounds look different today, it's Dr. Granpeesheh and I are both in different places for different reasons. But we are thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning. We're going to be with you live for the next hour, internet willing. And we're excited to be here. Good morning, Cecilia. We're so thrilled that you're here with us. We are, as I said, we're going to be live for the next hour, and there are lots of different ways to connect. I want to show you really quickly. But first, I want to say good morning to Dr. Granpeesheh and tell her how grateful I am to be here with her in this month of gratitude, and how thrilling it is to be here, because for those of you who watch the show, you know that Dr. Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism, and she's here today to answer your questions, which is a really wonderful thing, and it's such a privilege to be able to be here with her. So first of all, good morning, Dr. Granpeesheh, and thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Shannon, and thank you very much, and it's always a privilege for me to be here, and I just want to right away apologize to our guests if we should have any technical problems. Hopefully we won't today. I am in a new location, so we're testing things out. And also, if I keep looking up, it's only because my camera is below my screen. So when I look up, I'm reading the chat room.
Okay.
So it's nice to be here, and I look forward to answering questions.
Well, and since we're going to throw out apologies there, I'm in a different part of the house this morning because my neighbor has decided to take a chainsaw to everything in his yard. And even though I very politely went over and said, could you not during this hour, he informed me that could not happen. Now it is quiet at the moment, but we'll see. So if you hear it, I apologize in advance. We've done everything to get as far away from it as possible, but it's life, and this is life on life's terms this morning, right? But we're coming to you. I've always said, if we with this show, we've been through many different things over the years. And I've said, if we have to go live from the men's bathroom, well, we will. Fortunately, today, that's not on the table. Saying good morning to Bonnie. So thrilled that you are here with both of us. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, for those of you who are new to the show, and maybe this is your first time tuning in, there's lots of different ways that you can participate. And we keep growing that because Traven is so awesome and doing such a good job. So there are lots of different ways to connect, and we're going to show you some of them. Right now, in this moment, we are live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Periscope, as well as live on our homepage, autism-live.com. If you look in the second column, it shows you all of the places that we record and are a free podcast. So that includes iTunes, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Audible, and Deezer, and that's just the beginning of the list. Traven has run out of room. There's no more room to put things on that side. We really want to be a resource for you. You know, our mission here is to provide information and inspiration. So we try to do that in as many places as we can to get to you for free. If you look at this and say, hey, you're not in my favorite place to watch a podcast, let us know, because Traven is very good at searching that out and finding out. We do have the asterisk that we want to be in places where we are free to you. And we will keep doing that as long as we possibly can. But I do want to say that if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Periscope right now, you can be writing in real time. Bonnie just wrote in a question. We're saying good morning to Amanda as well. So you can write into us when we get it almost in real time, pretty close to real time now, getting better at that all the time. If you are watching us recorded and you want to write in a question ahead of time, because we have some questions ahead of time, you would want to go to autism-live.com, click on the chat button there. It pops up and you're able to send us a question. And I always check that before we start the live show to see what the questions are. I do also want to say that right now we are featuring the toy guide from last year, from 2019, on our homepage, autism-live.com. There's a little toy guide icon at the top. You can check out what the toy guide was for last year, but we're getting ready to unleash soon. I don't know how many days away we are from unleashing the toy guide for 2020, which I'm very proud of. And I'm so excited. We've added more awards. We have some that are just meant to be boredom busters in COVID. So I'm really happy about that. But back to Dr. Graham Pichet, because her time is so valuable. Want to remind all of you that she's been working in this field for, it's like I have a mental, it's over, is it 40 years? It's just like, it's redonkulous. 40 years.
42 now. Well, if you count this year, it's 42.
That's insane. Because you don't look 42. So like my brain rejects it and goes, no, it can't possibly be. So, but she's been working in this field, and not just working with small children. She's worked with everything from babies up through senior citizens. She absolutely has worked with children, but she's worked with teens, adults, like I said, seniors. Good morning, Christina. Good morning, Charmaine. We're so excited that you're able to catch us live this morning for the first time. That's wonderful. We're thrilled that you're here. But Dr. Graham Pichet, truly a visionary in this field, and I believe the preeminent expert in our time, and what other time is there? But I do want to caution you that there is no expert in this particular way of doing things that could give individually specific advice. So when you write in, please give her as much information as possible. You will get to pick her brain, which is a wonderful thing to do. But remember that it can't be individual specific. It wouldn't be fair to the individual to assume that she could know everything from a short blurb without having eyes on the situation. Okay. So I want to go to a question that was written in the night first. My daughter wants to grab anything she can in the household and puts all of it in her mouth. What can I do? I don't want to make light of this, but you know, I last night I wanted to put everything in the house in my mouth too. So I realize it's a different thing, and I don't want to make light of it because it's a very serious thing.
Yes,
and
it is.
And you know, people can be injured by something that they ingest or put in their mouth. So
That's right.
putting all of the comedy aside, what can we tell this parent?
Yeah, so, and unfortunately, that's a question from last night. So the parent might not be on the show right now with us, but I guess I would want to know if the child is actually ingesting, swallowing the things that he or she puts in her mouth, or if she's just putting them in there, kind of moving them around a little bit, chewing them, and then spitting them out. There is a difference. Pica involves swallowing things, and that does actually become quite dangerous. And also we would then need to find out if there are some nutritional deficiencies. A lot of times our kids, it's shocking stuff, but you'll see a little child who, for instance, might pick apart the wall and eat the wall. And then you find out, and this does happen actually, and we find out that the child has very significant calcium deficiency and is trying to replace that. So those types of things do happen. It is very important to find out if there is a deficiency. In terms of putting stuff in the mouth and chewing, That happens a lot with kids who have apraxia. In Europe, it's called dyspraxia, but it's basically the same thing. And it has to do with just the, you know how children, very, very young babies, will also put things in their mouth. And some of it has to do with them just trying to figure out what it is. When we're babies, we sense things, not with the tip of our fingers, but more inside the mouth. So we put things in our mouth because we're trying to identify what they are. But also, it could also be just the texture, wanting to chew or wanting some sort of hard thing in the mouth. And because there's, apraxia basically is when the muscle tone inside the mouth is not developed enough. So, and you will, as a child, then put things in your mouth, try to chew them, suck on things, like, you'll have a craving to try to put some activity in the muscles in the mouth. So like everything else, unfortunately, I have to say we can't really determine what's the best course of action unless we know the function. So, which one is it? Is your child nutritionally deficient? Is it just that they're trying to put things in their mouth because they like the sensation? Are they, we kind of need to know a little bit more there. But as Shannon said, this could be a pretty dangerous thing. And even if it's not dangerous, it is maladaptive. It's not, it's not very good for the child to be doing this. So there are some things to, like a lot of these behaviors, the answer is to try to replace them with something more appropriate. One of the studies we published a few years ago had to do with teaching the child to chew gum instead of putting objects in his or her mouth. So depending, again, I don't know the age of your child or the functioning level. If you are able to replace it with something like chewing gum, where instead you prevent that, you block putting foreign objects in the mouth, and instead you have the child ask for a piece of gum or a mint or something that will replace the need for some sort of activity in the mouth. So first, I'd suggest that you kind of find out as well, whether you do it first or second. You just need to find out if there's a nutritional deficiency. And otherwise, that's kind of what you want to do. Block it and replace it with something more appropriate.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to hit some of these questions that you guys have coming in. Bonnie wants to know, here's my question. Is it a good idea to move to a Spanish-speaking country with an autistic 7-year-old that is functionally verbal, but mostly in English? He knows how to count to 10 and the alphabet in Spanish. We can hire a bilingual shadow.
So, Shannon, do you get the impression that the question, does it, like, let's talk a little bit more about what we mean with functionally verbal. Is it only the alphabet, or I think that's the Spanish part, huh? They
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm guessing that the child can kind of communicate his or her needs in English pretty well. So assuming that, and we can let the Bonnie respond, but
Yeah.
assuming there's a decent level of communication so the child can have their needs met, can maybe describe things. If we're at that level of language, I'm not too worried, believe it or not. This is kind of a strange thing, but from science and research tells us that bilingualism usually does delay language. In fact, when you start in a bilingual family, most kids develop speech a little bit later than single language families. So that is there. But just my experience has been that our kids are pretty good with language, strangely enough. I've had many kids around the age of 9, 10 pick up Spanish, and it hasn't interfered with their English development. What I really do want to recommend is to make sure of two things. One is, well, it's all one thing really. Make sure that he doesn't get frustrated. Because like anyone else, when you go to a foreign country and you can't express yourself, or you do express yourself and people don't understand you, it becomes frustrating. And when it becomes frustrating, if it becomes frustrating for him, then there is a likelihood of two events. One is he will stop using his words because they're not working for him, and that's not something we want. And the second is that he'll get frustrated and maybe aggressive or angry about it, which is also something we don't want. So obviously it's safer to stay in an English speaking country until his language is much more fluent. But if you don't have a choice and you really like it's a family decision and you must move, then I just recommend that you make sure when he says things in English, as he's learning Spanish, his English is still effective and that he is able to get people to give him things and to pay attention and so on. That is very important.
And did you see that she said that he can say his needs in English, but he's not conversational in English
Yep.
yet? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to see that. Moving on, I just want to congratulate Christina. She says, my little told us 2 times this morning he needed to poo. And we are
Oh.
so happy. He even went poo in the toilet. And we are so grateful for all of our help. And she sent us a heart. And I'm just sending her a hug because I know that this is a mom that's been working on this for a while. And I think it's going to help us as we propel into the next question, which is, hello, Dr. Doreen. If you can answer this question, then I would greatly appreciate it. My son is almost 4 and is not potty trained yet. I want to potty train him, but I do not know how. Are there some strategies on how to do this? We are not getting help, too much help with certain things with my son.
Yeah, so potty training is the biggest question, it's the most frequent question we get here. And congratulations that you're at a point where you want to work on it. That's wonderful. And although it is kind of it appears to a lot of people to be a scary and arduous task, it's not really. It will work, as you can hear from the other parent who had success today. When you start potty training, though, you will just work on urination and you will leave bowel movements alone for now. But the best procedure that we've been, honestly, I was trained in this procedure back in like 1979. So, it is still the best procedure that all ABA people use. It was written up by Fox and Azrin. And I think we've not only done several shows about the step-by-step how to do it, but I think we've also maybe provided the actual link to where you can see it. If you actually even Google Fox and Azrin toilet training, it does pop up. So you can also get a written version of it there. But Shannon, you might want to tell them about our shows and how they can search there as well.
Yeah, on our website, autism-live.com, if you go there, there are a couple of ways you can search things. One of them is that there's a little, one of those little looks like not a microscope, what am I saying? A magnifying glass, right? It's a search feature, and you can search our entire feature, and you would put toilet training in, right? And it'll show you all the videos that we've done that have toilet training in their search feature. But that's a lot to go through, and it's not going to be completely suited to what your question is. One of the things I recommend is when you go there at the top of the website where there's a little toy guide icon next to it, it says search by topic. And when you click it, it gives you the choice of Ask Dr. Doreen. You go in there and you put in toileting, and it'll show you all of the questions that people have written. It's not completely up to date since COVID, but it'll show you all the questions that have toileting. If you click on the question, it'll take you right to where Dr. Doreen gives you the answer. So that's a great resource. There are so many videos and there are so many topics, but the reason why I like the Ask Dr. Doreen one is that you'll see the question, which is, how do I help my 12-year-old, not, smear feces on the wall, which is vastly different than the one of how do I toilet train my 4-year-old? And you'll be able to see what the questions are there. So I will say too, that for our card parents, we have even more videos that we're trying to get a platform to put those on so that more people can see some of the trainings that we've done about that. But if you're a card parent in particular, reach out because we have other stuff. It just doesn't have a home yet. Working on that. COVID. I hate to have that be the excuse, but things changed a little bit. But Fox Nazarene, amazing. I think you'll find that really wonderful. Okay, want to move on to the next question here. Going forward, as far as my daughter advancing in school, I want to do a parent-teacher conference. And I was thinking about developing a small presentation. Any suggestion?
That's very nice. So, you would like to have a meeting with your teacher and like talk to your teacher about your child's specific needs. I assume that's what you're going for. I guess the only suggestion, I'm sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
She's saying as far as what I should have in the presentation, like what kinds of things should I put in it?
Exactly. And I think, Shannon, you'll probably have a lot of advice in this area. I would say, just to begin with, I would keep it very concise. I would keep it very clear. Each slide should just have one to do on it so that it's really very clear. I would have some sort of measurable outcome, because oftentimes we depend on IEPs for our teachers to know what to do with our kids, or individualized education plans. But I promise you, most teachers don't look at that document throughout the year. So if you have an IEP, which I assume you do, it would be probably a good idea to take those goals and put them on this PowerPoint and tell your teacher, or talk to your teacher and discuss it together and say, how should we measure this? Like, what are we looking for? Let's say we want him to increase his language. So can you and I communicate about this every week? Something like that. I would establish a mode of communication. Perhaps you would want to have like a notebook that goes back and forth daily where the teacher writes for you. That's kind of what I would do. I would have a lot of ways where the teacher can communicate to you what's going on. I would make sure if your child has specific learning skills or issues, I would make sure the teacher knows that. So some of our kids, for instance, are very distractible. I would make sure the teacher knows, and also perhaps suggest things like, can he sit in the front? Can you please check on him? He depends on a token system. Whatever it is that you've established so far, make sure the teacher knows that, his specific needs, and also make sure the teacher knows his specific rewards. That's kind of an important one too. It's like, when he does well, could you please like give him a smiley face or let him go outside? Whatever it is that is a reward for him. Shannon, what are your thoughts? I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things here.
No. I love the idea of doing a presentation. I just want to caution you that when you go to the IEP, you're going to be dependent upon their technology working and their Wi-Fi working for, to be able to show it. So I would just caution you, if
Print
the
it out.
print it out and be prepared to know it without being able to look at it is one of the things. And the thing that somebody, and I believe it was Bonnie Yates that taught me to do this, and it was amazing, is that you ask in advance of the IEP for them to give you all of their written reports 48 hours before, so that you have a chance to sit and read through them, mark them up. I used to put color-coded little things and say, green was for where I had a question, red was for where there was a mistake that I wanted it changed before I would sign it, right? So I would do all of that. And then once I had done that, I would sort of ruminate on it. And then I would write them a letter. And I would write the letter and I would say all the good things. I would say, thank you so much. And we love that, this person and that person, we want to thank this person. We want to thank that person. So you always butter them first, right? And then I would say, moving forward, here are the things that we want for our son because we think that they're what would be appropriate. And I hammer the word appropriate because we can't ask, unfortunately, for what's best. We have a legal right to appropriate. So I would just say, here's what we think is appropriate and here's why. And then I would number them. And I would, each thing, like, we think that he needs to continue having a one-to-one aid. And we want it to be thus and so. We've seen him be, and I would always have what we want and why we want it. And I would have it be something and say, the data shows that he's doing really well in class with the aid, right? I would just go through. And so, sometimes some years I had 10 things, some years I had 2 things, but then I would say, thank you so much. This is what we want. And my husband and I would sign it. So when they go around the IEP and it would come to my turn, a lot of times I would already be so mad that I almost couldn't speak. And all I would do is read the letter into evidence, if you will, sign it, and hand it to them right there at the IEP meeting, which meant that they then had to respond. And there were so many things that helped us to be successful with school, like skills really helped us to be successful with school and to know what to put in that thing. And so we can talk about skills, but having that letter helped me because I wrote it when I was thinking logically, not emotionally. And all I knew at the IEP meeting, all I had to do was read it, and it was well thought out and edited, and I didn't have to worry. And because it's written, you hand it over to them, and it now becomes a record of the IEP. And because I read it while the tape recorders were going, it's official, right? That we asked for that and that we said why, and they legally have to respond. So that's my sort of thing on that, why I think, because I do think having your ducks in a row really helps. But for me, it meant a letter. But I love the idea of a PowerPoint.
It's a very good idea.
If I could have had dancing bears come in, and we used to bring a picture of our son too when he was little, or anytime they didn't know him, we would bring a picture of the boy in so that it was like they couldn't just give us a cookie cutter. And I would refer to it and say, well, my son doesn't respond to that well. My son, I was horrible, passive aggressive, but that's kind of what works. Is now a good time for us to talk about skills since I brought it up?
Sure, of course. Why not?
Okay, so I'm going to take a second here, Traven, and I know you're helping her to be able to see the chat because you guys have written in so much. So go ahead and work on that. I'm just going to tell everybody. So skills is this wonderful tool that can be used in so many different ways. And I always say to people, it's like Disneyland. Don't expect to do it all in one day, right? Decide what it is that you want to go into skills for. But skills does a lot of stuff. And then the companion piece to it is IBT, which is the Institute for Behavioral Training. And there are a lot of great tools in it. And every week, Skills and IBT lets us know what they're offering you guys for free. So here we go. Get your pencil ready, because at the end, I'm going to give you the phone number to call to ask for these things. This week, they say, for our ABA parents and guardians, we will continue to offer free IBT, the Institute for Behavioral Training, parent e-learning course, Parent Starting to Teach. For the educator community, for the teachers, and if you're not a teacher, tell your child's teachers, we will continue to offer our IBT educator e-learning module, Educator Useful Strategies, and that is available to teachers at no charge. How amazing is that? But also, and I think this is one of the most exciting things, we will continue to offer our RBT, which stands for Registered Behavior Technician 2.0 training course, free for the parent audience on a case-by-case basis, which means you have to ask for it. That's a 40-hour course that is like the training, the video portion training that registered behavior technicians, your really good trained therapists get. And you can have that free at no charge if you request it. And in addition, they will continue to offer 10% discount on all skills products for anyone that calls and says that you saw it on the show, you want the friends and family discount. Tell them, it always cracks me up. You don't have to say that, but say it because it's fun. And what you need to do to get access to any of these free items is call this phone number. You ready? I'm going to say it twice, 877-975-4559. Again, that's 877-975-4559. If you are internationally watching and you're not able to call an 800 number, please just email me at s.penrod@autism-live.com, and then I will forward your email to the correct people to be able to hook you up with those services. Okay. Really useful. And you can use skills. You can just take the assessment for skills to find out where you or your child are, like where the deficits are. You can use it for behavior intervention. There's so many things. It was so helpful to me in the IEP process. Okay, so I want to get back to the questions here. Good afternoon, ladies. My 4-year-old daughter on the spectrum speaks to her brother in conversation, will talk to my husband and I, and that is all. She will not talk to anyone else. She loves going to preschool, therapy, Sunday school, etc., but she will not talk to the other kids. Any ideas or suggestions? She starts ABA on the 10th soon. And we've had at least one other parent write in and say, I'm so interested to hear the answer to this, that they're looking into selective mutism as well, and that their daughter has it. So Dr. Granpeesheh, this is a very interesting case, right? 4 years old, speaking in conversation, but not only to very select people.
Yeah. So that is kind of good news, in my opinion, because it is just about anxiety. So it's not about the child's capabilities. This is just an extreme version, in my opinion, of social anxiety or being shy. So you just, like everything else, you break it down and you essentially reward very, very, very small steps. And I'm sure once your ABA team gets on board, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to suggest that you reward her for, let's say, the person who is the closest outside of your immediate family. So let's say a grandmother or a housekeeper or somebody that she does see frequently, but she has not spoken to, would be the first person to try this out with. And you basically your daughter is, you withhold a very meaningful reinforcer, whether it's a food object or a toy or whatever it is. And you make sure that your child knows that if they say a single word to this individual, they will get that reinforcer. And you just do that over and over until it's pretty clear. And the child is now spontaneously on their own saying at least a single word to that one person. And then your job from there is 3 things. You increase the number of words to that person. You increase to other people. So you generalize. The first part is called response generalization. So you increase the response that's required. Then you're in stimulus generalization, which basically means you will increase the number of people that she will say a single word to and then sentences to. And you always do that by rewarding. And then the third portion of this is that you reduce the reward over time, because ultimately you don't want your child to only speak if they're getting a food reinforcer, right? You want it to be a natural thing. And I think once she has established a little bit of more security around it, like a feeling of safety, it won't be that bad. There are other things you can do. I often talk about anxiety within autism because I think it's such a big factor. But there are other things you can do, like it might be very difficult for her to give people eye contact. And it might be okay for you to allow her at first not to give eye contact when she's talking, because anxiety is kind of, it contradicts eye contact, right? When we have a high level of anxiety, we try to be invisible, like nobody can see me. And also you can give her like an object that, let's say, a lot of kids use like a small pebble or something that they can put in their pocket. They can put their hands in there, play with it. It'll give her security, like a security blanket type thing. So those are some of the things. I mean, try those things out and come back and report to us, because that's kind of the behavioral way to deal with it. But if there's anxiety that is interfering with other aspects of life, we can talk about different solutions for that as well. By the way, if, let's say, her sibling or you or someone else is around her, standing around her. That could also give her a sense of comfort if she's about to say something to someone else, but don't prod her, because when we put our kids under a lot of pressure to perform, it increases anxiety. And I generally do actually put our kids under pressure to perform in ABA, but not when they're highly anxious. When they're highly anxious, you kind of have to draw it out of them by motivating them. And the way you motivate them is with a reward.
Okay, and I'm glad you went back to that because I just want to get a little clarification. I think this is one of the most misunderstood parts of ABA because I think experts talk about it and parents put it through a filter that isn't the right filter. So when you say withhold a reinforcer, we're not, I just want to be clear, we're not talking about walking up to the child while they're holding their favorite stuffed bunny and grabbing it out of their arms and saying
No,
to them, I'm taking this and I'm putting it on the shelf until
no,
you
yeah.
talk to the housekeeper.
Yeah,
That's not
thank
it.
you. No, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. So oftentimes I will sit with parents and give them a lot of ideas about satiation. This is like a big area because ABA is all about motivation and reinforcement. And reinforcers, we all have reinforcers. Like everybody has a reinforcer. If you think your child doesn't have a reinforcer, believe me, they do. One reinforcer that we often don't think about is self-stimulatory behavior. When a child is doing self-stimulatory behavior, that is rewarding, and that in itself can be used as a reward. But there's so many things. Like most children will have a food reinforcer. Some children will have social reinforcers of different kinds, spending time with you, playing in the playground, toy reinforcers, tangibles, activities. I mean, there's so many things. Sensations, sensory reinforcers. A lot of kids enjoy things like, a scoosh ball or something like that. You have to play with it. And actually, if you just observe your child, if they have access to a lot of things, they will be drawn to those things that are reinforcers. So now when I say withhold, it's not take it out of their hand. It's actually try to put those things away so that the child doesn't have free access all the time. So you could do that at night after the child is asleep. You can put them away. And then when you see the child looking for that object, you definitely want to give it to the child, but you want to require something. You want to require either an utterance or in this, like some sort of response that you're currently trying to increase. And so don't give away all the reinforcers for free. Give them when the child has done some behavior or some vocalization, something that is part of their growth cycle. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Really important. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're talking about taking away the things that are reinforcing to them. No, 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 no. We're talking about making sure that they're there as a reward. Because none of us are sitting there and feeding our kids chocolate cake every minute of every day. Like
Yeah.
we wouldn't. We know, like, and first of all, it wouldn't be good for the kiddos. And after a while, they would hate chocolate cake if that's all we fed them. You
Yes.
save chocolate cake for special occasions. And that's what she's saying to you. Save those things for special occasions. And that's what keeps them special. And your kids will want to be, they'll be motivated to do something because when I do something, then I get
Yeah.
all they connect it together. And that's the keys to the kingdom right there. Because I was just talking about this with a parent yesterday afternoon. And I was saying, when you key into that mindset of, I'm going to make, when my child does things that are good for them, I'm going to make sure that it's rewarding from them. And then they key into it. Life becomes so much better. And,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry to interrupt, Shan, but like
oh,
I just want the parents to realize, like we do this with all our kids, right? Our kids earn pocket money. This is all about earning your rewards.
yep.
And that's really all it is. And believe me, you need to do that with your child on the spectrum because we need a lot of rewards because we're going to teach a lot of stuff.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. I wanted to go back to a question that I had missed. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. Dr. Grampiche, have you ever heard of any studies with Rett syndrome and ABA?
Mhm.
If we were to give our ABA prescription to CARD here in Virginia, Could I request that we only focus on functional communication training? Because I'm guessing that their child has a diagnosis of Rett syndrome, and that's the thing that they would want to use their ABA hours for, is functional communication.
Yes, 100%. So I'm not aware of research that specifically Rett's and ABA, but I've worked with a lot of girls who have Rett syndrome. So over the years, in fact, one of my very early cases in the maybe even 70s or 80s was a child with Rett's. Rett's is classified as an autism spectrum disorder. So there are other genetic disorders as well that are classified under ASD, but you should be able to get the same funding. And yes, absolutely, when you tell your card office that you would only like to work on functional communication, 100% they will do that. No question. And by the way, I want to say that for everyone here, if your preference is for us to focus on just one area, that is absolutely what we will do. Don't forget, you are the parent, and you are the guardian, you are the parent. It is your decision what we work on ultimately, which is why I always want parents involved with their ABA supervisors and with skills, so that you can see the thousands of things that we would like to work on, and that you can narrow it down and say, hey, I know my child, I know this is where we need to be right now. And so absolutely, and we'd love to, and don't be discouraged. I have had a lot of success with kids with Rett's.
Okay. Our mom, who said that her son requested twice today to go poo, wants you to know that they're doing an MRI of his abdomen on the 20th to try to figure out his severe constipation. And she's wondering, what are they looking for? What might they be looking for?
So normally when you have very severe constipation, we're looking for inflammation, but that would be a scope. That wouldn't be an MRI. An MRI, they might be looking for obstruction. So it'll be interesting to see, or just, they're wondering if the intestines are non-functional for some reason or other. But I would go ahead with the MRI. And furthermore, I would probably try to get with a physician who has some experience with autism, a gastroenterologist who has some experience, like Arthur Kriegsman out of New York. And I'm not sure if he still also practices from Texas. Or Tim Bowie from Harvard. There are several physicians who are GI doctors who are very focused on the gastrointestinal issues that we have with our kids. And so they are very good. They will do a scope, an endoscopy, and an endoscopy is, it's pretty pervasive. It's not an easy process, obviously. Now, I used to work with Arthur Kriegsman in Texas years ago, and they had just started doing pill endoscopies, where you basically, it's a pretty large pill and you swallow the pill and the pill takes pictures, but that is only for if it's upper GI, if it's small colon, so small intestine. So I would, depending on what the issue is, you have options. Obviously, start with the MRI and make sure that everything is functional. And then they'll want to see if there are problems in specific parts of the intestine. Now, let's put all that aside for a second. Do you know that about 80% of our kids have some sort of intestinal issue, some sort of inflammation in the gut? And this is honestly, people, like a lot of people don't know this, but I do, because I lived through this. So the reason that now we have gluten-free foods everywhere, and even when you go to a restaurant, there are many, many restaurants that have a gluten-free portion of their menu, or you can modify it to be gluten-free, is autism. The reason is autism. This did not happen to everyone else. It is now, but 20 years ago, and this is a really good example of when I talk about our kids just being more sensitive to environmental factors than everybody else is, right? They have issues with detoxification. They have much more inflammation. Their system is much more sensitive. I will very honestly, more than 20 years ago, I can't believe we're 2020, like 30 years ago, my kids were starting to exhibit a lot of issues with gluten. And I remember when I had children, the very first child that I had who was diagnosed with celiac, which is the total inability to process gluten at all, was in, believe it or not, 1991. So
Wow.
that long ago. And that child had a lot of resources, and they had gone to Sweden and had seen a physician there who was very into this issue. This was before the DAN movement, Shannon. And so
Wow.
then, of course, the DAN doctors all came together, and then there was a lot of information on the Andy websites, if you remember. And so
Mhm.
it started from autism. So what I want you to do, in addition to kind of the mainstream stuff, which is MRI and scope and so on, is to perhaps consider talking to a naturopath who will just make sure, just find out if you can actually remove the gluten and see if the inflammation goes down and the constipation is gone.
Yeah.
Constipation is because of inflammation, and a lot of times it does. The big hardship is actually keeping the child off gluten for 6 months, because that's how long it takes to see an effect. And I know you've had personal experience with this, Shannon, so I want
Yeah.
to let you talk about it too.
Well, and mom has said that he's recently had a clean out of his bowel and that he's a different kid. He's not celiac. He's been tested, and right now we're in the process of a dairy-free 3-month trial. And I know that you've been so excited with how much improvement you've had, and I've been talking with this mom and even taken some pictures of products that we use here, because it's hard. Sometimes the things are more expensive and you don't want to waste your money, but there are some products that are gluten-free, that are dairy-free, that are available on the market and are tasty. And there are others that it's like eating an asbestos tile, and they cost the same, a lot. So she and I have been talking a little bit. I will say this, that both my son and I have tested negative for celiac. But
Yes.
I test positive for having an allergy to wheat. He does not. But my child, if we have a wheat infraction, he even now has a harder time speaking. That is just the thing. And I
Yeah.
can't, you know, I I know that that is not the case for everyone, but I do think, and I know you're in the middle of the dairy-free trial, but as big of a response as he has had to the dairy-free trial, I would encourage you, when you can, to do what Dr. Grampiche is asking and do the gluten-free thing too. Many of the products that I took pictures of for you last week and sent over to you were already gluten-free.
Yes.
And the thing with gluten-free is that a lot of times people go, well, we'll go as gluten-free as we can during the day. No, that's what you do about organic. You go as organic as you can and you hope for the best. But gluten-free, you got to do it 100% or you're not
Yeah.
getting the benefit of doing it at all. Um,
And
uh,
I want to say
yeah,
just two things about that. First of all, with dairy, it's the casein, so it's the protein in dairy, right? And generally speaking, casein, you only have to do it for 3 weeks in order to see an effect. Gluten is the one that takes a very long time before it clears out of your system and that you can see an effect. So maybe talk with the physician who's monitoring this for you, or the dietitian, and ask if you can move to gluten sooner rather than doing 3 months just on casein.
yeah,
With casein, you see a very fast response, and I've seen incredible things with our kids once they're off milk. So I'm a big, strong believer. I will say my daughter also has celiac. She has diagnosed celiac. And let me tell you, it is not that hard to go completely gluten free. She's
sure.
also vegan. So I have to give her a vegan, gluten free food all the time. And it's totally fine. There's so many good gluten free products out there now. It's amazing. Like, you can order them online, you don't even have to go anywhere. I remember, Shannon, parents who were told their child has to be gluten free, and we couldn't even find gluten free bread or
Oh,
gluten
right.
free flour. Now you can use a whole array of other things.
Yeah, it's amazing what's available now. And I do want to say, someone else wrote in and said, my son tested negative for a wheat allergy, but he's a different kid since going GFCF, and that they're still working on soy.
Great.
Soy is the next bastion that a lot of people, and you'd like more info on the GFCF diet. And I think, we can absolutely do that here on the show. The other day, Dr. Grant Pichet, I showed them the box of a Breads from Anna banana bread mix that I was making. And everybody kind of went a little bit like, they were like, oh, I got to know more about that. So if that's information you guys want, we absolutely can talk more about that in coming shows. I will make sure that we do that. We're getting close on time though, and I wanted to get to a couple of more questions. Okay, we got some more about potty questions. I have a question about wiping the bottom after a BM. We have put a visual schedule and provided reinforcers, but spontaneously, my 7-year-old doesn't clean himself. After pooping, once he is done, he just pulls up his pants.
Yeah. So this is okay. You can teach this, but it requires someone who is teaching him, being with him every single time, and just stopping him at that phase and reminding him that he needs to wipe, and teaching that one step that somehow didn't get learned. And I would definitely recommend that you use like wet wipes, or what are they called? The new dude wipes. They're just wet wipes for adults, basically, and use those because it'll make it a lot easier for him to wipe. Now, I don't know your child. I wish I did, but you can do other things too. You can actually show him how to do this on a doll. You just need to make sure that he definitely knows the movement, how to do it, and that it's not obstructed, like something's not coming in his way, and then he will and block him from moving forward unless he does this, and then you'll be good.
And can I just say too that, when a lot of times we'll say, well, I gave a reinforcer for it, and we think that all reinforcers are the same and equal and even, but it's not that way for us. You might be giving a reinforcer for it, but the reinforcer may not be big enough. When you get the big enough reinforcer, it might, you might see a different result. Am I completely up a tree, Dr. Grant Pichet, or are you with me on that? You always say it has to be
Shannon,
fair.
you can hear me. I can't hear you because we got disconnected.
Oh, no.
So I will call you now.
Okay. All right. While she is doing that, here we go. Can you hear me now?
I'm back. Yes.
Okay. So I have to address this one because I have a suggestion and I want to hear from you as well. Nancy would like to know, how can I teach the alphabet for autism for someone that's a nonverbal kid? He is getting confused between A and B, and we also have chromosome deletion. Any help? And we had this on a toy guide many, many years ago, and I still talk about it. It was the first product that I said everybody should have this, and then we started doing the toy guide as a result of it. And it is Leapfrog's DVD. It's the Letter Factory, and they do a bunch of them, but because then they have the Sentence Factory. But the Letter Factory is the one that every child should have in their home. I have not found anything that teaches the alphabet better. It's scientifically researched in the way that they go about it, because they give a visual and then they pair it with emotion. So every sound, every letter is a character, and they have their own room in the Letter Factory, and they do emotion and they repeat it 1,000,008 times with a song. It's everything that helps people to remember. So it's my most favorite thing for kids learning the alphabet. But Dr. Grant Pichet, anything you want to add to that after I've just said it's the best thing on the planet?
No, I love that. I mean, I'm always in favor of any toy that will help a child learn. So I love that. That's awesome. If you are in an ABA program, and or if you would like to do this through ABA, as soon as we start teaching letters, there is we teach everything receptively, which basically means that we are just telling the child to touch A, touch B, touch C, etc. And obviously you want to stay with, when you first teach it, you will do all capitals or all smaller, lowercase, not confuse them with both. And it's matching. So you can also just, start with matching later, the big A to the little a. But in the beginning, it's a discrimination training process, which is very simple. You target the A first, and then you bring in another letter, etc. And all of this, so the discrimination training that I referred to is on the IBT website. So Institute for Behavioral Training. And it is ibehavioraltraining.com. And on there, there's actually a module called discrimination training. I recommend that for everyone because it teaches how to teach the first two of anything. So it's kind of like, not just letters, but, colors, numbers, names, objects. Discrimination training is one of the most important parts of ABA. So if you can learn that, and also obviously there will, in skills, if you go to skillsforautism.com, and Shannon was talking about skills before, there's a letters lesson in the academic curriculum. So all of that is very doable. But I love the idea of having a toy do it because that's so much easier.
And my favorite thing with the DVD is there's a setting on it that you can put in where it automatically loops. It's maybe 27 minutes and it'll loop and play again. And we just had it in the background all the time, and he got all of his letters.
That's awesome.
And I've, how many years, 15 years I've been recommending it to everybody. I'm sure it's harder to get now because I don't know that they put it out new anymore, but it's the Leapfrog Letter Factory. And you'll hate me later on because you're going to be singing the song, but that's okay. I have broad shoulders. I can take it. We're getting down to the end here, and I apologize. We're not going to get to everybody's comments, but there was somebody who said, Gary said, I'm glad there is more information for adults who are on the spectrum than there used to be. And I know that this is something that you feel very strongly about, Dr.
I do. Yeah, I'm also very glad, Gary, that there is more out there, but there isn't enough. And I am very, very passionate about doing something for the adults. Shannon and I were just talking about that a couple of days ago. And I just love working with the adults, and I'm hopeful. I will tell you, by the way, there's really good information for adults on the Autism Speaks website. So you might want to look there. There's some pretty good stuff there for parents. There's like handbooks in case you want to give one to your grandparents or to just basic stuff, but helpful.
Wonderful. And I also like the website wrongplanet.net. Somebody wrote in and said Leapfrog Letter Factory is on Netflix now, for heaven's sake.
That's great.
We live in a new age. I absolutely love that. We've only got a couple of minutes, and I've got to address some of the things that are happening tomorrow. Tomorrow, Dr. Barry Prezant is going to be on Autism Live, which we're really looking forward to. He's the author of the book Uniquely Human. And so he is going to be with us tomorrow. Please make sure that you tune in for that. He has been on the show before when we've been live on location, but we've never had him just in the regular show. I don't know why. It's my fault, but we're thrilled that he is going to be here. We're saying hi to Michelle. I'm so glad that you are here with us, Michelle. But also tomorrow, there's a very important thing that I want to let you guys know about, especially because we're talking about teens and adults. That there many of you over the years have asked us questions about conservatorship, and so we're hosting, Autism Live is hosting in conjunction with CARD a very special town hall tomorrow that's happening at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and the subject is conservatorship. We're having a really wonderful family law attorney, Indu Srivastav, is going to be with us. The first part of the program, she's going to just talk about conservatorship, what it is and what it isn't. There's a lot of mistaken notions out there about what it is. It does not have to be all or nothing. And she's going to talk about how there are different points that we're talking about when someone turns 18, if you don't do something else, they have all the rights of any other individual. And none of us want to take rights away, but in some people's cases, they need someone else to help them to protect them. And that's really what conservatorship is about and should be about, is making sure that the person's safety is protected. So she'll talk to us about what it actually is. Then she's going to give some resources for people that don't live in California, but she's going to talk specifically about the letter of the law in California. And then at the end, there will be a question and answer period for anyone, whether you live in California or another state, about conservatorship. If you have a child that is 13, 14, in there, actually, I would encourage you at any age to attend it, just so that you know what it is and what to plan for. But you need, if your child is 16 years old, you need to be planning for this. It sometimes takes 2 years to go through conservatorship, and we've seen too many circumstances where kids turned 18 and this wasn't in place, and bad things happen. I never like to use scare tactics, but bad things happen. This is why we're doing this. It's free. You do have to register for it. It won't be on this platform. It's a webinar. You do have to register for it. And if you go to our Facebook page, the registration is right there. But we are out of time, Dr. Grant-Pichet. Thank you for sitting through all of that. But we
Always a
adore
pleasure.
you. We appreciate you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you back next week.
Sounds good. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. And I'll say to everybody, we'll see you tomorrow with Dr. Barry Prezant. Make sure you register for that free webinar if you'd like to attend. But we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're coming to you live from many places around the country today. So thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday morning, November 5th. We're doing a quick shout out to a dear friend of the show, Therese McLaughlin, who's been a lifelong friend of mine and who's helped us so many times when we've gone to live events. If you've ever been to a live event with us, and there's like this wonderful redheaded woman who is often at our booth, who is like laying on the floor and letting children paint her face. That is my friend, Therese McLaughlin. And I always say to you guys here on the show, there's nothing better than having an ally who's in your corner, who is amazing and who loves you and loves your kiddos the way they deserve to be loved. And that is Therese McLaughlin. So we're saying happy birthday to her. And thank you for indulging me in that. Good morning and welcome, everyone. And already I'm saying hello to Christina. Thank you for being here with us live. We're so excited to be here. I don't know if you guys are fans of the show This Is Us, and if you had a chance to see their big season debut the other day. It was a week ago, Tuesday. It was a 2-hour special, and I love that show, and I love everything about it. And I love that now that they're doing a season in 2020. It's the first time that I've seen a show really effectively deal with how we all are in this pandemic and people wearing masks, and it covers that period of time. And there was one scene in particular where the one young man comes and says to one of the stronger people on the show, I don't want to give things away, I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but he says, "How are you?" And the dad is kind of like, why are you asking me how I am? And he says, because in these current circumstances, it's important. They say that it's important to ask your strong friends how they are. And so I'm asking you today, how are you? Because you guys are the strongest people I know, hands down. So how are you? How are you today? How are things going? Are you doing okay? I'm sending you hugs and love, and I hope you're doing okay today. But this is a safe space, and you can bring whatever you have to be here safe. Avani wants to know, are we able to view the webinar at a later time? So I want to make you aware of the fact that today, and thank you for bringing that up, Avani. Later on today, we've got a great show for you first this hour, but later on today, Autism Live is co-sponsoring a town hall event that everyone is invited to. You have to register for it, but it's a free registration. But because it's on Zoom, you have to register so that you can get the code, and we don't have people who just want to come and, disrupt. The topic of the webinar is conservatorship, and we have a wonderful family law attorney, Indu Srivastava, is going to be with us. And she's going to first talk about conservatorship in general. Then she's going to talk about conservatorship specifically in California, because each state has different laws, and she will give resources for where you can find out what the laws are in your state if you're not in California. And then there will be a question and answer period. We will be recording it. I just want to give the asterisk that we hope that we will be able to make it public later. I know that we had attempted to do that once before with one of our town halls, and we had an issue because people were asking questions, and somebody asked a question and gave basically their phone number, and so therefore I could not share the recording because I couldn't give that person's phone number out. So we think that we have found a way that cannot happen tonight, and it is my hope that it will be recorded and that we will be able to show you. But I like to be open and honest, that it will depend on that. But everything has to go well with the recording, and nothing that could potentially give somebody's personal information. And if that is the case, then we will be able to make that available. So yes, you have to catch up on This Is Us. I really thought it was an amazing, obviously it wasn't on this week because of the election, but it'll be back next week. And I said to my husband, there was something so healing about watching television with people who are wearing masks and dealing with the same kinds of things that we're all dealing with, and having considerations about, okay, well, this person went there. Do we have to quarantine before spending time with them? I just thought it was very well done, and I so appreciate. My soul needed it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, we're yes, and thank you for what somebody said, trying to survive the moment, and I think that's everybody. But you know what I always say here, that it's so important that we not only survive, but we have to at least be trying to thrive, right? And that's hard some days, and some days it's just not possible. But whenever possible, I remember years ago, it was a very transformative moment for me that somebody was talking about how in your life you have ups and downs. And they were showing this chart that had the up, down, up, down, up, down. And it said, your things are, and I thought, boy, this really is indicative of my life. Things are going really well, and then something happens and it's like, and then you get it back together and things get, right? And they were saying how important it is that this is everybody's life, right? You find something happens, and then if nothing else, when things go bad, try to maintain as much as you can, so that instead of going like this, when you pick up again, maybe you're here and then you can go from there, and that your trajectory of making progress is better. And I know that we certainly found that to be a really effective way of looking at things, that every day couldn't be filled with progress, but if we could maintain till we could get to the next place of progress, that helped a lot. And that's what I mean about trying to thrive. Okay, some people are saying that they're feeling better. This is all good. Well, I'm really excited that you're here with us today. And I want to talk about, for those of you who might be new to the show, this show is meant to be interactive. We really want to hear from you. So let's talk about some of the different ways that you can be a part of the show and be a part of the conversation, which we really want to be having with you. Right now, we are live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Periscope, and on our homepage, autism-live.com. And we will be live for the rest of this hour. Later on, we will also be recorded in all of those locations, that you'll still be able to catch the recording of what we do during this hour. But we will also, within the next few hours, we will podcast the entire episode off to iTunes, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, which I love, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Audible, Deezer, and many other places. In fact, we are in as many places that we know of that we can be a free download. We are free in all of those places, and you can subscribe, you can like. We love it when you review us on iTunes. That's a wonderful way to let the world know about us. We don't spend money on promotion. We count on you guys to be our grassroots promotion. So if you like the show, express it to other people and let them know, hey, I watched the show, you might like it. Because that's how people find us, and we appreciate when you do. If there is a place that you like to get your podcast and you don't see it on that list, check to see, because we've run out of space. Check to see if we're available on the way that you like podcasts. And if you see that we're not, please let us know, because we like to be in as many places as possible, because our mission here is to provide information and inspiration. And that is for what we call here the larger autism community. Starts, of course, with individuals on the autism spectrum. They are the living, breathing heart of our community, right? And they're the reason why we're all here. But that larger community that we include is everyone who loves those individuals, loves them and wants for them to have all the rights, dignity, opportunities, and respect that they deserve, right? So we're talking to that entire community and trying to help that entire community with information and inspiration to be able to not only survive, but to hopefully thrive. It's different for everyone. This playing field is not level. And so it helps us when you write in, if you're, especially if you have a question, if you tell us what part of the world that you're in, and that way we might be able to tell you about different resources in different places. And I'm sending my love to Ian, who's got a headache, and I'm hoping that that subsides for you. But thrilled that you're here with us. I hope we don't add to the headache. I never want to be the cause of a headache, but I'm sure that I have been before at IEP meetings in particular. Anyway, so thrilled. It's such a privilege to be here. You know, we always say that we have lots of experts that are on the show. Oh my goodness, have I got a great expert for you today. We're going to talk about him in just a second. But I just want to point out to you, we do have lots of experts here on the show. I always like to remind you that I'm not one of them, that just isn't my shtick. I'm not an expert in autism. I'm not an expert in, I don't know anything really. I know a little about a lot of things, but not an expert. Now, so why am I here? Well, I'm here because I am a former teacher, and I am the mom of an individual who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. And I want to make sure that none of you feels alone. And I want to make sure that you all get heard and that you have an opportunity to ask questions of experts. Early on, when my son was diagnosed, I just wanted to know more. I wanted to understand. I wanted to help him. And I wanted to give him the brightest future that he could have. And I would see these conferences, and they were like $225, which to me at that point in time was, they might as well have been held on the moon. There was no way that I could get together $225 and someone childcare to watch my child and know that they would be okay with him and he would be okay with them. Like, how on earth was I going to do that? And I remember feeling left out and like I was alone and that I had failed. And part of what we try to do with this show, and what we've been doing now on this show and another show I used to host called Everyday Autism Miracles, is give people an opportunity to ask the questions that they would have asked if they had been at a conference, and to bring guests that are amazing and at conferences that you might not otherwise have an opportunity to hear from. And we're certainly hitting it out of the park today with that. So I encourage you, write in your questions, comments, concerns, whatever you have. We, on all the platforms that I listed, when you're watching us live, at least on the YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, and Facebook, you can write in on those platforms and it shows up right here for me in real time, which is a big treat. We've had some technical difficulties on this format, but we're loving that aspect of this. So we're working through those technical issues. I will tell you, if you're watching us in podcast or listening to us in podcast, that writing your questions into us at autism-live.com, there's a chat at the bottom, and I always check that before the live show. That's a great place for you to ask your questions if you're watching us recorded. So just keep in mind, lots of experts. I'm not one of them, but I care so very deeply about making sure that you guys get access. That's really what I'm about here. Okay, now on Thursdays, before we get to our guests, we always like to do the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are the experts talking about? What does this have to do with me? Why should I care about this? Why am I having to learn a whole new alphabet? And believe me, I've got some alphabet coming at you in just a few minutes here. I hope it's not going to make Ian's headache worse. Let's start with our jargon of the day, BIP, or some of us call it the BIP. Um, it is That is not what the experts like to call it. They call it the BIP. Let's take a look. First, we give you the actual definition, and whenever possible, I like to make fun of it because, what else do you have to do in this life? And then we like to give you the working definition so that you can begin to understand how this could be a tool for you to use to get to a better place. I always say if it can save you 5 minutes and $5, hey, it might be worth learning what the term is. This one is pretty important because it can be a matter of life and death. So let's take a look at what BIP or BIP stands for. A BIP is a behavior intervention plan. It's an action plan based on observations made in an FBA, which we learned the other day is a functional behavior assessment that outlines how a team will improve difficult behavior that is inhibiting a child's success in school and other environments. Okay, I think we understand if we know what an FBA is, which is that's a climb in and of itself. We sort of understand, okay, it's a planned, behavior intervention plan. It's a plan to um, intercede with certain behaviors. But let's take a look at what our working definition is here to see if, and I think this will be very interesting in light of who our guest is today. So a BIP is an essential process that helps us understand why a challenging behavior is happening so that we can change it effectively. And I don't even like the wording of that. And I'm sure that our guest may take some issues with that as well. But I think that he'll love the fact that it's about understanding why a challenging behavior is happening. Because we know here on the show that behavior does not happen in a vacuum. There are lots of people who look at a behavior and go, well, oh, that's just a random behavior. There's no such thing. And people will say, oh, well, someone is behaving that way because they have a diagnosis of autism. And there's no such thing. That people engage in behavior as a means of communication. And if we don't know why a behavior is happening, then we're not going to be effective at anything. At being compassionate about that behavior, about making that behavior something that's more useful to the individual and something that's less disruptive. And so it's really important, and I'm thrilled because we're going to talk with our guest today, and he's going to talk about this. I know this is a subject that's very near and dear to his heart: is why is the behavior happening? So, but what I want to focus on right now before we have him join us is the fact that if your child is attending school, and I know a lot of you have, your children are having your school at home right now, but when they're attending school, it's really important that you have a behavior intervention plan that's effective and that is safe, and that it be something that everybody understands, and that they understand that it is something that must be implemented, and that they not just pick some random way of dealing with a behavior that happens. This is when kids get hurt. We've been doing this show for almost 10 years, and across that 10 years, it just breaks my heart every time we see another story about a kid at school who's been handcuffed, like a third grader being handcuffed because people did not know what they were doing. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really be proactive in asking for a really good, solid behavior intervention plan that is thoughtful, that is person-centric, that is individual, that looks at why the behavior is happening, and has science-based things that help to deal with the behavior. Because some behaviors that happen in a classroom are things that have the potential to be a danger to the child or to other children. Yeah. And we need to be able to have a plan. But if you don't start with the why, you're dead in the water. And I don't think there's anybody who is going to agree more with that than perhaps our guest today, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. I'm building the suspense. But if those of you who have been watching our social media, you know who's going to be on the show. Let's move on to our question of the day. Don't forget, if you do have a behavior intervention plan, make sure there is a box on your IEP and that you check the box behavior intervention plan is attached to the IEP. That makes it part of the legal document that must be followed. Super important to know that. So our question today is, how do you spend your free time? What do you like to do with your free time? And that might be different than it used to be. If you are living in a place like I am, where we are still social distancing to the max. So write in and let us know, how do you spend your free time? I love hearing how people take time for themselves, because I think as we get older, especially for those of you who may be caregivers, we forget. We forget how to enjoy our free time. We forget how to utilize it. So I love it when you guys write in and say how you do your free time, because that sort of primes the pump for the rest of them. We go, oh yeah, I used to love to do that. Why don't I do that anymore? Could I find 5 minutes to do that? Which is a super important thing to do for all of us. Okay, moving on, we have a topic of the week, and our topic this week, I don't remember what it is. I can't remember. Oh, right, acceptance versus contentment. And I think that, how could I forget? Because this is one of the most important things in an important week. We have to remember that we can rail against the things that we are unhappy with in life, right? We can do that. It's not very effective, but we can spend all of our time being in a place, well, why did this happen? I do love the story that when Oprah Winfrey was being, she was in court for having said something on her show about the fact that she wasn't going to eat meat anymore, that she was going to become a vegan. And the Meat Association was taking her to court. I don't know, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it was a long, drawn out court process, and she had to move her show to Texas, and she was really struggling with it. She was struggling, and she just was like, why is this happening? I don't understand why this is happening. Why is this happening? And they brought in this psychologist to talk to her, and he said to her, you need to like move off of the page of why is this happening? It's happening. And you can sit there and be in the why, but you're spinning your wheels and you're not getting anything done. You need to get into the page of what I'm going to do about it. You don't have to be happy about it, but you need to accept that it is happening and stop trying to, revisit the past about why. So we want to see why about behaviors, but in life with big things, we want to look at the why, but not be stuck there, right? And he said, you don't have to be in contentment, but you have to get into acceptance. And there's a big difference. You don't have to like what's happening, but you have to accept that it's happening. And I have found that to be a really wonderful way to get back into action, to say, oh, okay, it's happening. What can I do? Oh, okay, now I've got something to do instead of just being stuck. So who was the psychologist who came and said that to Oprah? Well, that was Dr. Phil. And that's how he became Dr. Phil, because he told her to snap out of it and to accept that it was happening and to get into the phase where she could decide what she wanted to do about it. And I know, as a parent of an individual on the autism spectrum, there were many times that I got stuck. I got stuck in the, what will become of us? And that's easy to do. There's a lot going on. But as soon as I would say, okay, well, this is where we are. This is realistically where we are. I don't have to like it, but I have to acknowledge this is where we are. Now, where do I want to get to? And how do I want to get there? And what am I going to do about it today? Then I had a better day. And for me, that's the difference between acceptance versus contentment. If you can accept where you are, you don't have to like it. Think you'll find it's a quicker path to get into a place of, okay, so what do I want to do about it? What would I like to change? Do I have the ability to change it? And how could I start changing it today? Wonderful. All right. So really quick, because we're past time. I can't believe I went over. But today on the show, and we've had him on the show before, but only when we've been at a live event before. So it's the first time we've had him on our regular sit-down show. I just don't know why. But we have Dr. Barry Prezant. We've been talking about this all week long. He's an author, speaker. He's a professor. He's internationally recognized as an expert in the field of autism. And I'll go one better. The thing about Dr. Barry Prezant is that he is a bit of a unicorn in that we have this big, diverse community, and we talk about this all the time on the show, that we don't always agree on everything, right? And there are different, people who will champion one person and other people who will champion another person. But the thing about Dr. Barry Prezant is I'm not aware of anybody who doesn't like him in the autism community. And that's pretty remarkable. Folks who are self-advocates love him, parents and caregivers love him, And I think the press loves him. So that's a pretty unique thing in this community to be so well loved. So we're so excited to welcome to the show Dr. Barry Prezant.
Hi, Shannon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I've never been called a unicorn before, though.
Well, and now you're going to have to get a unicorn pin or something.
That's
But
right.
I think you understand what I'm saying. It's very difficult in this community to be someone that both caregivers love and that individuals who are on the spectrum and identify themselves as self-advocates. Sometimes those two groups have a hard time seeing things at all similarly. And
Mhm.
for you to be well loved and respected by both is pretty remarkable. Do you feel that on a daily basis?
I do, sometimes in very concrete ways. For example, my book, Uniquely Human, it's amazing when I look at, I think there's well over 1,000, ratings and comments on Amazon now. And as you said, and this truly, truly was a surprise to me. I thought I was writing it primarily for educators and parents,
Mm,
but people on the spectrum, school administrators, parents of adult children on the spectrum, it's been very widely embraced. And I think, as you were just describing that, I think I do have a hunch as to why I feel what I say kind of connects with a broad audience.
yeah.
And that is what I call my 4 worlds of autism. Um, and let me just begin by saying I don't have a child or a family member, a close family member on the spectrum, but I was a caregiver starting out working in summer camps where I was responsible for many years as a teenager and young adult for the care and the happiness of children and adults, many of whom had spectrum, if not diagnoses, they were on the spectrum. We're talking about late
Yeah.
60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
I've worked closely with parents for years. We've been doing a parent retreat weekend for close to 25 years, where we take 60 parents to a beautiful setting. And I do that hand in hand with parents who run a family support agency. Um, I've been in academia, I've published research. So I've kind of had I've had my hands in a lot of different worlds of autism, and I've worked in a psychiatric hospital. I consult to public schools. I consult to early intervention programs. I consult to adult support programs. So I've just been out there a lot, which I think has sensitized me to the experiences and needs of a very broad audience.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say to you that I think that it's the perspective taking piece, and I think that you have a wonderful insight into, as you say, those 4 worlds of autism because you've been there. You've been there and been next to people. And someone is saying that you get to be a double unicorn because you also get the 2 kids. That's what somebody has written in and said, which I love. So I didn't even finish introducing you because you're Dr. Barry Prezant, and you have a lot of letters after your name.
Yes.
And I was saying earlier, I said we're gonna go alphabet land. So, and I want to take a second to talk about all the letters because I think it does give you unique insight. So, tell us what all the letters after your name mean, Dr.
Yeah.
Prezant.
Well, this gives me a chance to be self-indulgent and talk a little bit about my big influences. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, First of all, my undergraduate degree was in psycholinguistics. And at the time, it was an area developing rapidly. And psycholinguistics has to do with understanding the relationship with how we think, how we perceive the world, and then how we talk about that and communicate that. Um, and Within my undergraduate years, I was exposed to courses where we spoke about, well, what happens when language does not develop the way we had hoped it would develop, or communication does not develop in that way. And then that led me into a master's degree in speech and language pathology and a doctorate in communication disorders. So the letters are CCC-SLP, which means I'm certified by the American Speech and Hearing Association. But one more quick comment. When people say, oh, so you're a speech pathologist and that's what you focused on,
Mm.
I say, no, I focused on, and in my coursework, most of my doctoral coursework was in child and human development. So I learned about how all children learn to speak, learn language, how all children learn to play, how all children learn to relate, how all children learn to come to understand their emotions and their emotional experience. And I was able throughout my whole career and still to this day, use that rich understanding of child and human development to understanding people on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying that, because I do think that sometimes people go to a speech and language pathologist expecting to get what they got in your book, Uniquely Human, and I
Mm,
think that often they're disappointed that maybe you luck out and it's somebody who's a speech and language pathologist who's read your book, but they're not going to have your wealth of knowledge that you have. So I think it's important to distinguish that. But let's talk a little bit about the book, because it has been so well received. It's not a new book that's out, but it's Uniquely Human. And it's so respected though in the community, Dr. Prezant.
mhm,
And I think it's that thing where I think everyone who reads it finds their place in your book,
mm,
and because of your perspective. And I think it's been a huge addition to the autism community because of your unique point of view. I don't know if you saw when we were doing the jargon of the day, and one of the things that we were talking about for the behavior intervention plan, I said, finding out the why the behavior
I
is
did say that.
happening is so important. And I think you've been like the voice of reason in a world where there's so much arguing about which way to go.
Mm,
But talk a little bit about why the why is important.
mhm. First of all, let me give credit where credit's due. Um, the why, and what I refer to the deep why, because I think there's a difference between the functional behavioral assessment why,
Hmm.
where a student or a person is trying to obtain something or avoid something, or it's sensory. I see that it's a why, it's a step in the right direction, but I still, with all due respect to many people, I see that as a very superficial. That, for example, we could say, well, a child, bolts out of his desk and runs down the hallway, and that's escape motivated behavior. And you say, well, that's the reason he did it, to escape. The deep why is he putting so much energy into escaping?
Yeah.
Is that the academics are too difficult? Is it that he's what we refer to as a high arousal child? In other words, he's got so much energy and he just can't sit still for a half hour. So maybe we should give him a break every 15 to 20 minutes to move his body. So that's the deep why. And giving
Yeah.
credit where credit's due, I begin Uniquely Human by talking about a woman with autism from England, Roz Blackburn,
Hmm.
who it's a long story how I got to know her, but I brought her over to the United States to speak 3 times. We've presented together. We traveled. Actually, at one point, she and Carol Gray, who developed Social Stories, and I did workshops together because I met her through Carol, and she says, and she's well into her 40s now. I have not seen her for a few years, but there was a period of time where we were together almost every 2 years here in the States,
Hmm.
and she would say, Barry, when people never asked why I did things, why I rocked,
Hmm.
okay, why sometimes and this is her phrase, I didn't want to do social, okay, I don't want to do social tonight, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, that she felt that people were not showing her the same respect that you would show a young, typically developing child. They would say, Roz, that's good behavior, or Roz, that's not good behavior. Roz, you had good behavior last night. I know you could show good behavior now. And what
Yeah.
Roz would say is, look deeper, try to understand my experience. Maybe, like, for example, if we did a workshop together, and this is a true story, a workshop together in New York City one day, and she's a marvelous presenter.
Hmm.
Um, Say, hey, Roz, why don't we go? There's a great restaurant down the street. No, I'm staying in my room and I'm getting room service. Oh, come on, Roz, we're in New York City, okay? Because I grew up in New York, so I know the city well. And then I don't want to do social tonight. and then she would explain that how being social is so overwhelmingly exhausting to her. And it's the same for some of us. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more of an introvert in real life.
Hmm.
And I get exhausted easily by having to make small talk at parties, not to the level that people on the spectrum get exhausted. So there's a lot of talk right now, actually, in the self-advocate community about you know, how much being able to monitor your energy level and respect your energy level and know when you need a break and know
Yeah.
when you need to say, I'd rather not do that, because that could lead to meltdowns. If you're constantly being
Yeah.
pushed to be in an environment that sucks all your energy out and people still expect you to do that. I mean, that's why young typically developing kids have tantrums.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and not tantrums, actually meltdowns. It's this distinction between tantrums and meltdowns. But yeah, so the why is so important. I think when we keep on asking, what I mean by the why, just to kind of sum this up here, is to the extent that we could do it, can we try to understand that person's experience?
Yeah.
Not just put the behavior in a category. That's non-compliant behavior, that's escape motivated behavior. I like to say, oh, well, you just call that child non-compliant. There could be 6 to 10 reasons why he's being non-compliant, meaning that he's not responding and following a request that you're making. It could be he's afraid of what you're asking him to do. It could be that he finds it boring. I don't want to do that again. I can go on and on. I can give you 6 reasons off the top of my head, which means that we need to change what we do to address the issue, the way we teach. Maybe it's the physical environment. Maybe it's not that he's not paying attention. Maybe it's because he's hearing a sound down the hallway that we could hardly hear, but he's hypersensitive to the sound and he could hear it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of detective work.
I love, though, that in your book, Uniquely Human, you constantly give examples of the fact, example of a time when you've run into this. So we see a lot of different kids and teens and adults in your book, and we can relate to them. But you also always relate it back to the fact that we all do this behavior to some extent, whatever it is that you're saying, like saying just now that, oh, I'm the same way, that I can be very social, like I can do the social thing, but I have a limit of how much I can do, and then I need to shut off, turn off, or I know that I'm not going to feel well.
Yes.
And you remind us a lot. I read your book years ago, and then I was rereading it this week before doing this interview with you. And I don't know, we didn't have a chance to talk beforehand, but one of the things that I know a lot of us have been upset about in the last month, I don't know if you heard anything about this show Big Brother that they were doing. And there was a contestant on Big Brother that identified himself as being on the spectrum. He had won the thing years ago, but now he was back doing the All-Stars. And Ian, the young man who identifies himself as being on the spectrum, demonstrated behaviors like rocking, right? And things like that. And there were at least 2 people on the show who took issue and took exception to his rocking and said that it was weird and that it was off-putting to them. And then they showed a video with all of them, all the contestants sitting there, including the 2 people who said that it was weird and off-putting, and before something that was very nerve-wracking. And if you look down the line, each and every one of them was doing something.
Exactly.
One of the people who said, his rocking puts me off, her foot was going 1,000,000 miles a minute.
Great.
And I love that in your book, you bring this up and say, hey, this is all of us.
Yes.
And that if you're put off by the rocking, it needs to start with you.
Yes.
You need to figure out, why is that bothering you before you even approach with looking at, why is that individual rocking? What is it doing for them? Why is it necessary for them? So I love that part of it, because I think so often people are so judgmental.
Absolutely.
And not looking inward. And you give us all the opportunity in Uniquely Human to take a look at all aspects of that. And
Yeah.
I certainly feed on that. But the book, we really want to encourage people to get the book. It, like I said, it's not new, but it's still so relevant. So obviously we can get it on Amazon, pretty much every major bookseller, correct?
And it's also been translated into 18 languages.
Nice. Well, that's
So
pretty
it's
fabulous.
it's in a lot of places, and I'll just say with some pride, but it's a fact. It's been just riveted in #1 on Amazon for the last couple of years.
There you go.
And I think it's, just to encapsulate what you said, to bring it together, a major takeaway that I try to really infuse in the book is that there's no such thing as autistic behavior. It is all human behavior.
Exactly.
And I think in practice, what you just said, I didn't see that Big Brother show, but I'm so pleased that they demonstrated that a lot of what they thought was weird, quote unquote, autistic behavior in different ways, they were doing it. But the deeper why is, why are you doing that? And in many cases, a lot of so-called repetitive self-stims, and this is being validated by adults right and left on the spectrum now, are self-regulatory. It helps you get
Exactly.
energy out. It helps you deal with anxiety. We can just go on and on and on. So let me just share something. And this is what I love about what's happened with my book. I get the most interesting notes and letters from people. Literally yesterday, and without letting any confidential information out, I got this long email. Sometimes I get these emails and I open them up and say, oh boy, this is long. I have to read it. It was an incredible story from a 58-year-old woman on the spectrum who was diagnosed 2 years ago, who's married, has a good life, but she spoke about how she always had so much anxiety and so many issues, and she had a lousy kind of self-image. And then she spoke about how she was literally physically abused due to her self-stims when she was a kid.
Oh.
And she said, I was traumatized. And a lot of people, adults on the spectrum now are talking about the trauma they experienced. I'm not saying all of it, but to some degree, a certain percentage of that trauma had to do with what they were doing to try to calm themselves, self-regulate, rock, pace, stare at their fingers. And people, even though the intentions might have been good, you look a little different. I don't want you to look different. That when people try to extinguish that behavior or give them negative feedback and try to correct them all the time, it shattered their sense of who they were as people. It shattered their sense of being comfortable with who they were. And it was taking away the strategies that they were using to try to deal with a chaotic, busy world around them.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly have talked on the show many times before about in the present day, the difference between, and we probably are not going to agree entirely on this, but just so you know, Dr. Prezant, I'm a huge fan of really good quality ABA. Because that's what my son had, and that helped us tremendously. So, but I always draw the distinction here on the show between really good quality ABA and the schlocky ABA that is being passed off as ABA right now, where where it's cookie cutter, where they don't take into consideration the individual, where they're not looking at the why. And I know that I really want to pivot to talking about certs. And
Sure.
I would love it if you would talk about certs on its own, but then maybe to give a little bit of a comparison, because people will write in and they kind of want to know the difference. Like, what's the difference between teach and, for instance, RDI and floor time? And I mean, and ABA and certs and a lot of people out there are confused. So do you want tell us about certs and maybe compare it to some of the other things that are out there?
Sure. Just to give you a quick and dirty answer, actually, in the certs manuals, we have a whole chapter on comparing certs to other approaches. Now, that was written more than 15 years ago, okay, but it still is very relevant. So certs
Tell us
is,
what it stands for first.
yeah, certs is an acronym, and it stands for what we believe are the 3 domains that must be the highest priorities for people on the spectrum, but not just people on the spectrum, people who have challenges in social communication and in staying well regulated emotionally and physiologically. Okay. And that's where we believe, problem behaviors come from. When you have problems staying well regulated emotionally and physiologically, it's Eric Schopler who started the teach model. I knew most of these people. Eric passed away a number of years ago. He always used the teach people use the analogy of the tip of the iceberg. When you're seeing the behavior, you're not seeing what's underlying that, the anxiety, the fear, the sensory sensitivities, something that we call negative emotional memories. I talk about in the book. Let's get away from that now. So CERTS stands for the 3 domains that we believe that really need to be front and center for people on the spectrum and other disabilities. We know that research for decades has indicated one of the best indicators, or what's called predictors, of kids and people doing well is progress in social communication. And let me just say this quickly. Progress in social communication doesn't mean saying longer and longer sentences. I mean, that may be a part of it, because as you know, many of our kids could memorize longer and longer sentences when they're shown pictures. Progress in social communication is knowing how to engage people, share emotions, share information, and engage people over reciprocal interaction. So you have some non-speaking people on the spectrum who have higher social communication abilities than some speaking people on the spectrum, because they can get their needs met. They could share how they're feeling by using a computer, a speech generating device, an iPhone, or whatever it might be. So social communication is one of the domains. And that also has to do with play development. And that's what underlies relationships, developing positive relationships with peers, with other people. Emotional regulation is the ER of the CERTS model. And the way I like to describe that is when we are well regulated emotionally, but also physiologically, okay, then we are most available for learning and for engaging with people, okay? So when we have challenges to being well regulated emotionally and physiologically, and what could cause those challenges? The sensory environment. It could be people who talk too quickly at us. If we're sensitive to touch, tactile defensiveness, it's people who touch us too much. It could be breaks in routine. There are, and we discuss this in many of our writings and in the manuals, there are probably a category of 10 different things that could prevent a person on the spectrum from being well regulated emotionally and physiologically. Okay.
I think this week is a good example to all of us. I know a lot of people are having a hard time being emotionally regulated this week. There are challenges to people this week. So we should be able to understand this.
Absolutely. And the things that regulate this, and the term we use is dysregulate people on the spectrum. The things that, it's the same for all of us. What I like to say is we are all dysregulated by the same things that dysregulate people on the spectrum. What's the difference? We have better coping strategies.
Sometimes.
Okay?
Sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we have meltdowns too.
Yeah.
But we have better coping strategies. So, for example, a child on the spectrum may look very, very anxious if a routine is changed, or if the teacher sings songs in a different order in the preschool. But a typically developing child might have the communication skills to say, hey, that's different. Why are we doing this differently? Or I want to sing that song now. So some of our kids learn to do that. Yeah. Okay. And it becomes coping strategies for them. Emotional regulation, and let me just say this with great pride, myself and my colleagues on the CERTS model, and in particular, Amy Laurent and Emily Rubin. Amy Laurent, one of the colleagues on the CERTS model, is an occupational therapist. Then she went back and got a degree in special education. And then she went back and got a doctorate in psychology. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we built in a lot of sensory issues coming from the occupational therapy. And she and I have written extensively outside of the CERTS model manuals on emotional regulation. A dear friend of mine, one of the most accomplished people on the spectrum in the world, his name is Michael John Carley. Michael's written 2 or 3 books. He was just hired by NYU to be the director of neurodiversity throughout all of New York University. Wow. He says the major challenge for people on this, he has a son on the spectrum. He's in his 50s now. He says the major challenge, no doubt, for all people on the spectrum is emotional regulation. Is that reflected in the DSM criteria?
No.
The only thing, sensory processing is one piece that has to do with being well regulated emotionally. If you're hypersensitive to noise and to sound, you're going to be anxious and upset. Okay. The third domain, the TS of CERTS, is transactional support. And that has to do with all of the ways that we, as parents and teachers, all of the way that people who share their lives with autistic children and people, the way we support them, the way I, as a professional, supports a distressed mom, a parent. And we have what we call interpersonal supports, learning supports. Then we have what, strategies for supporting families, and also strategies for supporting each other in the workplace. Do you have a good team approach? I would say for me, on my little checklist of a quality program is when there's a really good team approach and people respect each other and they learn from each other. So CERTS is social communication, emotional regulation, transactional support. I believe, and people say to me, well, and by the way, we have a curriculum for skills in all of those areas. And people say to me, well, do you have a curriculum for toilet training? And I say, no, we don't. But if a child is making good progress in social communication, for example, for understanding some simple directions, that's one part of it. And if a child can be kept calm and well regulated in a bathroom, then you're well on the way to successful toilet training. Okay. Same thing for a 15-year-old learning math in a classroom. If you could understand the language that's being used to teach math, and you don't get anxious when you see that math worksheet with 20 examples and you're going, I can't do this. And you could ask for help. That's a big issue in staying well regulated emotionally, knowing how to ask for help from other people when you feel frustrated. So we feel very, very strongly that you could look at almost any kind of task, academic, play, and you could look at a young child, or you could look at an adult on the spectrum. And basically, if those things are in place, you're going to learn better. And let me say this, you're going to have a better quality of life because there are fewer stressors. We all have stressors. Those of us who do better have better coping strategies to deal with them.
We have a couple of questions that have come in. So any tips for teaching the teachers how to understand the kids who have this rigidity? They typically just expect high-functioning ASD kids to bend and treat their rigidity as silly. This exacerbates the problem. And same thing, how do you stress the importance to the school of parent-teacher collaboration for the ASD kids? It's a great question.
God. Oh, yeah. I think we could think of, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but rigidity could mean different things. Okay. Rigidity could mean, I only want to sit at that seat at the lunch table every day, or I only want to eat this for lunch for my whole life, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay.
Mhm.
But there's also cognitive rigidity that has to do with, I always expect my routines in my life to happen in this sequence, and I get all confused if those routines don't happen that way. I think a big piece of the CERTS model is understanding that kids who very often try to control situations, at least they're described as being controlling, and are rigid, sometimes that's a coping strategy, okay? And usually, and here's where we come back to us, it's not an autistic behavior. All human beings become more controlling and in need of more rigid routines the more we feel anxious in our lives. Because what does it do? It allows you to have some control in one part of your life when you feel the other part of your life is out of control. I want to be clear. That doesn't mean it's okay for a teen on the spectrum to always insist in a classroom that things happen in a certain order, okay? But what it does mean is we want to get at the things that are making him so anxious that he needs to be rigid about it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That's the deeper why.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we experience this all the time, and I'm the person in our house who has OCD, and I love being around my son, who's now about to be an adult, and he'll see me on a day when things are not going well for me internally, and I'll have to go back and check the door 3 times.
Yes.
And I'll get back into the car, and my son will say, "What's really going on, Mom?
Yes.
What is it what's kicking your keister? What are you really worried about?" And he'll try to talk it out with me.
Yes.
I won't notice it. I'm not noticing it because I'm just in my head and I check the door, and then I go back to the car and I'm like, did I check the door? I need to go back and check it again. And then I'm like, I better check it one more time. And I'm not noticing that it's because I'm processing all those other things, but my kid is the one who will say to me, that's what's happening, which I find super interesting. But to her point that you can know that as the parent,
Mhm.
how do you make that clear to the teacher? How do we get the teacher? And I'm a former teacher. How do we
Mhm.
get teachers on this way, this path of thinking and looking at it this way, Dr. Prezant? Because this seems like Everest.
You know how?
How?
You teach the teachers. And let me give you some concrete examples of that. And again, I learned so much from creative parents over the years. I mean, I'm talking, let's see, I'm thinking of a young man who is in his mid 20s now. This is more than 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I was consulting to a 4-year-old. And the mom, because her son had a lot of anxiety and he shut down a lot and he would do things like run into the bathroom and slam the door closed, and he learned how to lock the door
Mhm.
to kind of get away from stuff. And I'll never forget that what this mom wanted to do. And at first the staff, and she did this every year for a number of years. First the staff felt, well, I don't know about this. This was in the day of overhead projectors and transparencies. And she said, can I come in and give a little presentation about my son, Max?
Mm.
Okay. And I was consulting, and so I was sitting with the team, and she literally went down, here are the things that increases anxiety, and here's what helps at home. Yeah, and her talk was all about the why, okay? And here are the things that sometimes he'll hesitate doing something, but if you're kind of a little bit more insistent and you support him, he'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't mean you just back off all the time, okay? So the bottom line is that I think, and this is, it's a cliche, but I think there's also a reality to it. When parents are seen as true collaborators on a team and share their expertise about their child, and also understand that they work, I mean, everybody has to pick their battles, right? Parents have to pick their battles with professionals. Professionals have to pick their battles with parents. Nobody's ever right 100% of the time. But I think the mutual respect is so important. Now, let me put myself on the parent side here. If you are working with a professional who says, well, I'm the autism expert, you're just a parent, then there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me just say, we build into the CERTS model, in our assessment process and every aspect of the CERTS model, we have whole chapters on developing trusting relationships with parents. And I've written many other articles since on that. And I feel I'm qualified to do that now because I sit one weekend a year as one of 2 professionals with 60 parents,
Yeah.
not at a conference, at a retreat, where I have the privilege of hearing the parents tell their war stories and supporting each other. Well, I mean, in addition to that, I have advanced postdoctoral training and family-centered support. So that helps
There
a
we
little.
go. Well, and unfortunately, we have more questions, but we are out of time. But I want you to give us some resources of where people can find out more about you, more about CERTS. Obviously, they can get your book, Uniquely Human, and there is a chapter in there about CERT. But where can they find out more information?
As far as concrete information, you can go to my website, which is just my name, barryprezant.com. Click on resources, and then under resources, click on downloads. I have about 60, 80, 90 articles that you could literally download and print. And especially for most of you who are parents and not professionals listening, if you are, for 5 years, I wrote a column for Autism Spectrum Quarterly magazine before it went defunct. And so there are 30 4-page articles that are non-technical, that are written based upon my experiences. I would say, of course, read Uniquely Human. So much of what I try to put into my writings previous to Uniquely Human, Uniquely Human is a storybook, and you alluded to that. It's a storybook. It's a book about stories of families and children. And you'll really kind of get the sense of where we're coming from, not just myself, but my colleagues and I in our work from Uniquely Human. Please listen to the podcast. We're having wonderful experts on.
Podcast. Tell them how to get to your podcast.
Oh, yeah. So I started a podcast as a partner with an autistic man, an engineer named Dave Finch. So it's a autistic neurotypical partnership. And it's go to uniquelyhuman.com, sign up, become part of our community. There's a place to sign up. We just started it a month and a half ago. We have our 4th podcast is coming out probably tomorrow. We are having guests who are parents. We're having guests who are researchers. We have some wonderful stuff called Enthusiasm of the Week, where we ask people to talk about their son or daughter's passion and enthusiasm and how they use that in positive ways.
Wonderful.
So it's gotten good reviews for the first few podcasts.
Thank you so much for being here with us, and we hope that people will check those sites out. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. We're totally out of time. I want to remind everybody that we are doing a special town hall tonight on conservatorship, and if that's something you want to go to, visit us on Facebook and sign up. There is a registration that you have to do, but it's free. But thank you so much, Dr. Prezant. Thank you, all of you. We're going to be back tomorrow with Autism Live, with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And we've got wonderful guests to go through some of the more recent research that we're going to be going through tomorrow. But thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, Dr. Prezant. I will see all of you later on today. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I'm so excited to be with you as well, Shannon.
And it's a great day, and we're going to be with you live for the next hour, and we're going to be talking about autism, always from a 360-degree perspective. Good morning, Amanda. We have people who are already starting to write in that they're here joining us. So let's talk a little bit about how you can interact with us, Nancy, because there are more ways than ever for you guys to interact, and then we're going to get right to our guest this morning. So, and then we'll do our news a little bit later on.
Later, okay.
But so there are many different ways that you can be watching the show live right now on this Friday morning, the 6th of November, 2020. You can be watching us live on YouTube, on Periscope, on Facebook, and on Twitter, and also on our homepage, autism-live.com. But I will tell you that if you're watching live on YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, or Facebook, that if you just write into us in the format of that place, we are able to see it on our screens in almost real time now. So thrilled to have you join us in any of those ways. I do want to remind you that after the show ends, we'll do it live, and when it ends, it will still be available on all of those platforms. But additionally, later on today, it will podcast as a free download on many different sites: iTunes, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Audible, Deezer, and many, many more. If you're not finding it where good morning, Michelle. If you're not finding it where you like to watch and listen to your podcast, and by the way, you can have a choice of listening or watching, let us know. We like to be on as many screens as possible. But I'm so excited to be here on this Friday morning with my good friend, Nancy Alspaugh Jackson. And we've got a great, great guest for you this morning. We enjoy on this show being able to bring, this started with Nancy and I always had this dream of covering the research that happens in autism and trying to bring some sort of sense to it. But I'm going to speak for myself. A lot of it is over my head. I don't know how you feel, Nancy.
Yeah, you need somebody to kind of break it down and translate it.
Yeah, and over the years, we would see a headline that would say something. It would be like, here's, this incendiary headline. And then Nancy and I would start reading the article, and we would go, I don't think the article and the results of the study match the headline. Mm-hmm. And that was disturbing to us. But a lot of times we needed like another person who knew, what was going on to explain to us what the study really revealed.
And so we found her.
Yes. In fact, we have a team of people, but more often than not, it's Leah Hirschfeld who joins us, and she's joining us right now. She is from the research and development team at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and we're so thrilled to have her with us. Good morning, Leah.
Good morning. I hope I can follow that introduction.
Well, and I could go on and on because we've so enjoyed over the last year or so you joining us to sort of explain things to us. And I know a couple of weeks ago, we put a couple of things, in the last couple of months, we put some things in your column and gave you assignments and said, go find out more about this. So what are we hearing about today?
Yeah. So, and at first, let me say, I love when I get assignments. It takes the pressure off me, and then I know I'm actually addressing something that your audience really wants to hear. So, anyone watching, anyone listening or watching later on all of those different formats that Shannon mentioned, write in, tell us what you want to hear about, and we'll make sure we address it. But today we're going to talk about the gut and microbiome. And it's very exciting, very sexy, which is not something I thought I'd ever say about gut and microbiome, but it is. And before I quickly get into that, I'll Shannon and Nancy already kind of addressed who I am, but like they said, I'm Leah. I'm a research coordinator at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I work on our research and development team. And like Nancy and Shannon already said, that's a really cool team, if I say so ourselves. We get to kind of make sure that we're addressing the best way to provide therapy with empirical research for our clients, for our caregivers. And so we spend our day analyzing data, running research experiments, trying to parse together what all the research that's coming out is showing. And I'm so excited that we get to also be on Autism Live to talk about it. It's really cool.
So you say this is sexy research. What makes it that?
Well, so there's, I think this is pretty wide in the research community, but you call research sexy when it's like hot and new and lots of money are being thrown around. Okay. So, at one point, sexy was like bilingual research. Gut and microbiome is definitely sexy. Everyone kind of wants a part of it. Everyone thinks it's really exciting. There's tons of money being thrown into it right now. And that's really cool and exciting. There's a lot of awareness going on that GI issues are a common complaint for autistic individuals. And it's way more common than individuals that are typically developing. So some researchers have said it's as much as 90% of autistic individuals have GI complaints. Others say, 2 to 3 times more than typically developing peers. And what that kind of points to is that there may be something interacting here between the gut and maybe the brain, and that's kind of, maybe there's a solution where we address the genetics that cause gut issues and brain concerns, and we can help target some of those symptoms that are related to autism. But at the moment, there's nothing definitive. So understanding that GI dysfunction is where we're getting at, but there's nothing here yet that's super definitive, and this is like a spoiler alert for everyone. But that the complaints of GI distress has increased. So like I said, the fact that there's so much research out there saying there are GI issues is something that our families and our patients can potentially run with as we wait for all of the sexy research to come out. So, I'm trying to think of the best way to spiel this right now. But like I said, there's a lot of awareness for GI issues. And if you're a caregiver or a parent or a patient trying to advocate for themselves, one of the things that you can make sure you do is go to your doctor and talk to them about any GI complaints you think you have or your child has. And really, there are some folks who might push that off and say it's just a side effect of having an ASD diagnosis. That's probably not the best way to resolve it. And we can really push to make sure that we're having some solutions and that we're addressing any GI concerns, right? So that, there's over-the-counter medication, there's diet, there's exercise, there's sleep, there's water. There's a lot of things that we can do to kind of address those GI concerns as we wait for the research to come out. And we've seen that, and I'll talk for myself. When I have GI issues, I'm a cranky mess. Like, I am not pleasant. And I'm sure that is true with everyone who has GI issues. So if you're resolving your GI issues, your child, yourself, whoever may experience behavioral solutions and better outcomes, and that may lead to some additional outcomes of like being able to learn quicker, being able to really focus on your lessons, things like that. So you really want to talk to your pediatricians or your doctors, and also talk to your ABA clinicians. Your ABA clinicians can absolutely help to make sure that if like you think someone needs a better diet or more variety to help with GI complaints, your ABA clinicians can absolutely help with food selectivity and things, with getting enough water, with adding an exercise regime, all of those things, between your doctor and your ABA clinician, you can help with those GI issues, again, as we wait for the research. And another thing can do if they're interested. So I'm going to throw in fecal transplants here. Also very exciting. A lot of people are, I think, a bit kind of the same vein as as marijuana right now, cannabis. Very exciting stuff, but very experimental. One study, talking about those headlines, Shannon, one study just came out a few months ago, I think, that showed some positive outcomes for fecal transplants. But there's a lot of, you have to be a little hesitant here. Those studies still need a lot of replication. Though a lot of those studies are still in the infancy, so they don't necessarily have a control group, which means there's no comparison between the two groups, and there's also no clear indication of like how placebo effect might affect individuals. So for those watching, placebo effect is you think you're getting a treatment, and so you feel better, regardless of if you're getting the treatment or not. Knowing that you're getting something or thinking that you're getting will get a placebo effect, and you'll feel better. So all those studies are really cool and exciting, but they're still really in their infancy. And I would caution anyone of either trying anything like that at home or maybe even trying it with a doctor. What I would recommend is talk to your doctor, see if it's appropriate, and then see if you want to get into a clinical study. There's a lot of clinical studies out there that are working with fecal transplants. They definitely need more participants. You can look at clinicaltrials.gov. You can reach out to research@centerforautism.com. We'll help you navigate that world. And know your rights as a research participant. Research is always voluntary. You can bow out at any time. There's no negative consequences to you. And you also have to have an informed consent. So you have to make sure or the researchers have to make sure that they provide you all of the information before you start a study. So you are very aware of everything going on. So, if you're interested in kind of working on that experimental stuff going on, I would highly recommend you work with clinical trials, talk to your doctor, talk to your ABA clinicians, talk to your clinicians and talk to your doctors about any GI issues that you see with your child or anyone else. There is a prevalence for GI issues with autistic individuals. And people are getting much more aware of that, which is cool, because you're not just going to hopefully get pushed off. And if you do, we can give you research that really says, no, like this is a serious concern. And you may see results. You probably are not going to see recovery results necessarily from solving GI issues, but you might see behavioral outcomes or quality of life outcomes. People might sleep better. People might feel better. And then the other last thing I wanted to plug was, Shannon, I think last time when we were talking about this, you had asked about a giant grant that I think maybe Autism got.
Exactly.
Speaks. It was Autism Speaks.
Autism Speaks. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And you asked me to follow up, so I did. And it looks like we don't have results yet. It looks like that data is still being analyzed, and a lot of that data unfortunately gets pushed because of everything that happened with COVID. So there is some delay in looking at it, and it's a lot of data. And this is true, I'm going to say also about a lot of the research right now. So like I said, sexy research. You're going to see a lot of headlines about $1 million grants, literally $1 million grants being thrown at this. But they're being awarded this year, middle of last year, which unfortunately means we probably won't see research results for at least another year or two at the end of 2020. Wow. I would be shocked if we see something before mid-end 2021. Research just takes so long. And that's true too if you end up in a clinical trial. You might find out results for yourself, but you might not find out results for the group or see published results for at least a year or something like that. But there is cool work going on, and I'm really excited about the future. And in the meantime, please talk to your doctors. Please talk to your ABA clinicians. Get everyone on board and say, I see them clutching their stomach a lot, or, they're on the toilet for a really long time trying to have a bowel movement. Like, there are other activities that we can do as we wait to kind of figure out what that genetic connection might be between ASD and the gut biome.
Okay, so let me see if I can encapsulate this, that what we have found out is that the prevalence of it's very prevalent, but we don't know why, and all the money being spent, we don't have the results back. But here's what's weird for me is that I think it's the worst of both possible worlds, because I think a lot of us have experienced going to the doctor and saying my kid has gut issues, and they dismiss it and say that it is autism. And it's nowhere on the criteria for autism. And yet, so we're saying it's very prevalent, but then they say, oh, well, that's just autism. And it isn't. They should still be treating the gut issues. So we just have to be more diligent, is what you're telling us, that we've got to fight for people to listen to us. And I would say if we're at a doctor where they're not listening to us, it's time to get a new doctor. And I know that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. The prevalence seems to be huge that individuals are having GI, and your doctor should not just push you off and say, oh, it's fine, just a symptom of ASD. There's things that people can do. You can absolutely work on resolving the GI issues, and God forbid it's anything more serious, but you can work on making sure you have enough water, have a variety of diet, have exercise, whatever it is, and your doctor should be supporting you in that. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm glad that we got this update. We, in fact, had Nancy, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we had on the lead doctor who was doing the fecal transplant study out of Arizona or New Mexico, I want to say. And they were just in the early stages, but it was very exciting because fecal transplant is not something that's new. I mean, people have been doing it even within their insurance companies. Adults have been doing it. I think what was a little bit different for the fecal transplant study in Arizona, if I remember correctly, because I know I know someone, they used to work on the show, that their mother was someone who had been doing fecal transplants for over a decade for adults. And so she was like, oh yeah, it's not quite mainstream, but even your insurance was, if you were an adult and were having a certain kind of GI issue, they would do it. But it was a transplant that was given rectally. And what they were doing in Arizona that was, I think, really controversial and that was grossing us out was that they were giving it orally.
Yes.
And that was the thing that we were like, oh my goodness, I can't, I must look away. But they were doing all these things to separate out what it was that they wanted to give the transplant to. And then they were giving it in this like milkshake container. And I couldn't even look. I just, but
I mean, it sounds gross, but the stool sample is put through a process where it does not look like
and it's sanitized, but it's the enzymes or the I don't know what that's in it that is preserved, that they and I guess, as I recall, because it's been like 2 years ago, that part of the issue was that doing it rectally, it would only recolonize the good bacteria in the lower part of the colon. And they really wanted to get in the small intestine of our kids because they were seeing that made a much better outcome. So I find it interesting. Nancy, this is a very sensitive subject, and I don't know that Wyatt would appreciate us talking about this, nor would my son, but did Wyatt have gastrointestinal issues?
Yes, he did, until he was put on the gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And if he consumes dairy, he has a lot of intestinal issues.
Yeah. And same thing with my child. He would not appreciate me talking about this, but I would say that my entire family is, we have a very interesting gastrointestinal history. So, but he's super sensitive. And even, at this point, he's still gluten-free, casein-free. And it was last year at this time that he said, every once in a while, he'll say, can we do a dairy challenge, Mom? And we did a dairy challenge. He ate cheese for 2 days in reasonable amounts, not like, tons of it. And I said, you can eat it for 2 days. And at the end of the first day, he said to me, can we stop? I don't want to do it. It tasted so good, but I can't do this. I'm in so much pain. I don't feel good. I don't want to feel this way ever again in my life. So, that was so powerful to me, that, he was 16 at the time. And he was like, I don't want to do this, Mom. I can't. And I was like, well, then yes, let's stop it. So I can't imagine That's what he was saying when he was 16 and verbal. He wasn't able to tell me when he was 3 and I was giving him macaroni and cheese, right?
Right.
But I was seeing behavior that I was like, what's happening? We can't live our lives this way. What am I supposed to do? And when we took him off of the gluten and the milk, we saw a different child.
Mhm.
I will say that I don't think that solved all of his gastrointestinal issues. And I think that people need to be aware of that it isn't just diet. There are other things as well. But the diet certainly helped with a lot of different things. And you said that too previously, haven't you, Nancy?
Yes, the diet helped with behaviors as well, and
Yeah.
increase in language and other things that we saw was pretty apparent to the naked eye. So
And we have a viewer who's been watching, and I know had checked in the other day and said that their child went dairy free, and she said so far the no dairy has been absolutely awesome. And somebody else said, I can tell when my son has a yeast issue. He smells different, behavior is off. And I think diet can be a very important thing. I used to make me so mad in the early days of our intervention when people would say diet has nothing to do with it. And I would just be so frustrated. I would go, well, then by all means, drink this beer and tell me how well you can perform afterwards in your daily, routines. Let's see if it changes it at all. Of course, what you put in your stomach or don't put in your stomach makes a difference. But I always think back to I'm allergic to milk and I'm allergic to wheat. And I remember, I want to say it was 1984 that Phil Donahue, this is how old I am, but you can search it up because it's available on YouTube, you guys. Phil Donahue had on his show, it was considered very unethical at the time, but it changed my mind. He had a group of kids that were in his studio and you could see them playing and they were interacting and they were just, kids and everything was fine. But he knew because the parents had told them that these kids were kids who were reactive to milk. I don't know, allergy or whatever, but they were reactive to milk. So they gave all the kids some milk and went to a commercial break and came back and it was bedlam. The kids were screaming and yelling and crying and that kind of crying when they like they're so out of control. And it was 8 minutes later. And I remember, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what milk does to some kids. And I remember going, holy business, and again, highly unethical. We don't give things to children that we know are going to make them reactive, but he changed my mind that day. And, I whenever somebody says to me, oh, I don't think it can make that big of a difference, I'm like, take a look. It's there. The video is there. Somebody else is same here. My son is GFCF and he has helped him with his language as well as behavior, completely different kid. And I feel the need to say, disclaimer, it's not all kids. I also know people who have done the gluten-free, casein-free diet and did not see any behavior change, did not see, their child's gastrointestinal stuff better, did not see any, and I think that's been part of the problem when trying to get science and you folks, you researchers, to see, because they'll take 10 kids and they'll put them on the gluten-free, casein-free diet. And, maybe 6 of them don't have a big difference. And so, and 4 of them do. And they come back and they go, well, statistically, it's not likely, it's been crazy making for those of us who have seen a difference in our kids.
Right. And to that point too, it's hard then to make a recommendation where, okay, everyone who's autistic should go on gluten-free. Not necessarily, but it could absolutely make a difference. And I'll make a plug there. I don't know necessarily, but I know, there are allergy tests and things that you can do that if that's maybe why there are GI issues and it'll show up on an allergy test, absolutely your doctor can run that. And I don't think that should be such a big hurdle to ask for an allergy test.
If you have insurance, you can certainly ask for an allergy test. It's something that's pretty run of the mill. The issue is going to be that there are different types of allergy tests, and there's Nancy, you might know there's the AGA and the AGE, and some of them are more definitive than others. But I will say that we did get my son tested, and he did not come back as someone who was reactive to milk or to gluten.
Right.
But
So it's not
because
necessarily something they're going to show a reaction to in an
Yes.
allergy test.
But I will say it showed us other things that he was allergic to, which
Yeah.
helped us, right?
Okay.
And because of my history of being allergic to wheat and to dairy, we made the decision to put him on the GFC. Because at that point, we were waiting for ABA to start, and I was like, what can I do?
Mhm.
What's in my arsenal? What can I possibly do to be helping my child?
Right.
And so that we said, well, let's just try it. It's not going to hurt him. I know that people worry about, will your child get enough calcium? But my child was eating green leafy vegetables. I think if your child won't eat green leafy vegetables, you have to look at what your calcium sources are and make sure that your child's getting enough calcium. Calcium is important for growing bones. But I have a child who's 6'2", and he has been gluten-free, casein-free since he was 3. It is doable. I want everybody to know that it is doable.
Shannon, how did you find out you were gluten and casein intolerant?
Well, you know what? I was dairy allergic to dairy as a child. As a baby, they diagnosed me as being allergic to milk, and so my mother had me on soy formula when I was a baby. And then later, as a child, I would eat sandwiches. I ate Wonder Bread, and I drank milk, but I constantly had all these allergy issues and a lot of health problems as a result of it. And so my mother finally, they said, you should probably take her to an allergist. So I was probably 12 when they officially tested me. Now, the irony of this was that my brother, my younger brother, constantly had allergy issues and ended up in an oxygen tent twice a year. So they had done all the allergy testing on him, but it never occurred to them to test me as his sister. So 12 years old, they did the allergy testing and said, "Oh, you're allergic to milk." And I don't think they tested me for wheat then. I discovered it later on. There was a book, Dr. Berger, who was a big allergist in New York City, put out a series of books about how many people have hidden allergies, and that you can be just slightly allergic to something, but it can throw you off at different times of the year. And that's exactly what I had at that point and still have, that in the spring and in the fall, when things are, mold and things are flourishing, I struggle. And that if the tighter I am on my allergy diet during those times, the healthier I am. And if I'm not tight on my allergy diet, I lose it. So I did his elimination diet and discovered that I was horribly reactive to wheat, and then subsequently have been tested for that. But there were years I went back to eating milk, and it was 2 years ago that I did another allergy panel and came back allergic to milk, allergic to wheat. I'm allergic to beef and pork, but now I'm vegan, but I was vegetarian for years, so I don't eat those. But the other thing that was a ginormous bummer is I'm allergic to bananas. And I expect everyone to cry for me. That is a horrible, horrible thing. But I wouldn't have known that. And I was eating bananas, and I was eating yogurt and not feeling well. I do think it's important that we do get our kids tested for allergies. When we had Jem tested, we found out that he was allergic to almonds. And any kind of a nut allergy, it's really important that you be aware of those, because those can get bad fast. So I am a big fan of getting tested.
And I'll throw in, Shannon, you mentioned that your son luckily loves leafy greens, and so calcium was not a problem. But that's, again, where you can talk to your ABA clinicians. There's tons of research, and they have tons of strategies to make sure that food selectivity, if that's your concern as a parent or a caregiver, we can work on that and really make sure. And I've seen it work. Like, kids who used to be picky now eat basically everything. They're better eaters than I am. So that's something we can definitely, talk to your ABA clinician. That's something we can definitely work on if that's a concern, especially if that impacts GI. There's so many behavioral implications. So that's really cool.
Well, one of the things that I've heard often is both in the autism community and outside the autism community is if there's something that you or your child are eating, that it's your main thing. Like if all your child will eat is nachos, that you know, with the corn things and the cheese over the top, it is more likely whatever you're addicted to is more likely to be the thing that you are having an allergy to.
Right. Yes.
I
Right?
believe that.
And that makes it hard.
Wyatt craved dairy and carbohydrates when he was allergic
Yeah.
to, when he
Oh.
had reactions to gluten. But that's
Oh.
what all he craved. And in the beginning of doing the diet, we just used replacement foods, cheese. It was non-dairy cheese, non-dairy tortillas. I mean, gluten-free tortillas, things like that. So he was still craving and thinking he was getting the actual food. that he
Yeah.
was allergic to.
And listen, if you know the things that I fantasize about being able to eat are like French bread and butter pecan ice cream, and to me, you know, that's death on a stick. But I want to say that, you know, what happens when you have a child, a lot of fear that the parents have, and they go, well, my child only eats chicken nuggets and French fries, so I'm not going to be able to do your gluten-free, casein-free thing. My child will cease to exist. And none of us are advocating starving your child, right? But a lot of people have discovered that when you put a gluten-free nugget in, and I've got a great gluten-free nugget for you, when you put those in, then all of a sudden your child will eat a leafy green because you're breaking that addiction, and they can taste other things and they like them. So, but if you have, here it's Ralph's, but in a lot of the world it's Kroger. Purdue sells a gluten-free chicken strip nugget that's in your deli section, like not by the lunch meat. They're organic now. They're gluten-free. They are chicken nuggets. And my little nieces who are not gluten reactive, who are not on a GFCF diet, that is their favorite nugget now because they've had them at Aunt Shannon's house. So I'm telling you, they are better than your gluten-infused chicken nuggets, and they're organic.
Yeah,
So
we
we're
used to get the Dinosaur chicken, the Wilshire Farms Dinosaur chicken.
But I got to be honest, those are super expensive.
Yeah.
And these Purdue ones are less, they're still expensive, let's be honest, but they're not as expensive as some of the other ones. Because sometimes you get those little boxes of the gluten-free chicken nuggets and it's like 5 portions and it's $10. And at our grocery stores carry these Purdue, the chicken nuggets. I might ask Jim to go get one out of the refrigerator to show you. But every once in a while, they put them on sale, and we always stock up on them. So get me talking about food, ladies, and it's all over. So people are writing in saying, same here. My son is GF. Let me go. My son is GF. CF, I gotta find it over here, and it has helped with language as well as behavior. Completely different kid. Someone else says, wish my husband would try dairy gluten-free, would help him. You know, at one point we had 2 of our therapists on our team decided to go gluten-free, casein-free for 30 days with Jem as solidarity, and guess what? Both of them felt better. One of them discovered by the end of the month that they were celiac. And said to me, you may have just saved my life. I can't tell you how much different I feel. Somebody wants to know, what's this Nemechek protocol all these parents are doing? I haven't even Googled it because it sounds sort of far out. And somebody else said that's like Bell Evans, you get 3 in the box. Yes. So I am not as versed in the Nemechek protocol, but we can have somebody to come on and talk about it. But it's pretty intense. Did you do the Nemechek protocol, Nancy?
No, we did not.
Okay, so we'll get somebody.
I knew Wyatt was casein allergic because of, as a baby, he had an allergy to formula, and we had to go on Nutramigen because he colicked. Generally, if your child colics terribly, that's a pretty sure sign that they have a dairy intolerance.
Interesting. I was one of those militant breastfeeders that I was breastfeeding Jem, and we did not allow him to have cow's milk until he was over a year, and then I did not allow him to have wheat either because I was afraid of him being allergic. And at that time, they were saying that if you keep food out of their diet, like peanut butter, when Jem was a baby, I was not allowed to have peanut butter while I was pregnant, and he was not allowed to have peanut butter as a baby because of the allergies in our family. At other times, they've said, no, feed it to them when they're a baby so that they'll build up a tolerance to it. I don't know what they're saying right now, but we kept anything we thought he might be allergic to later on, we kept out of his diet for the first year. And I will say this, he was typically developing for the first year.
Mhm.
And, and then we did start giving him milk and wheat. And that was when we started to see a difference. I don't think that caused it, but I will say that we started to notice it then. So anyway, I think there was another comment that it was, so Nemetschek protocol, I will have somebody come on and talk about the Nemetschek protocol because it's pretty intense. And I have not done it, although I know people who have done it, but I know a lot of people who looked at it and said, I'm not going to be able to do this. So there you go. Well, I've talked over you so much, Leah. So what is there anything you want to end on with this? Because then we will do our in the news. But last thoughts, maybe.
No, I mean, I think this is all great, and you never talk over me. It's always a pleasure to be here. Just the takeaway: there are more GI issues in autistic individuals than the typically developing population. Your physician should not just say, "Oh, it's fine, it's ASD, that just happens." There are solutions, and you might see results behaviorally, language, whatnot. When you make folks feel better with, when tummy issues, they suck. They just really hurt. And so, and if you're interested in fecal transplants, if you're interested in anything that's kind of on the edge, experimental, please just make sure you're doing it responsibly. Clinicaltrials.gov is a great option to look at clinical studies. Then you get to potentially do a fecal transplant, and you get to help science. Woo! Yeah. And sometimes you get paid double woo. And if that's something you're interested in, reach out to research@centerforautism.com. We can help you traverse that world. If there's any kind of questions you'd like to see as we come on every month. I think December at the moment is probably going to be Karen Nolte, who's our head of research. So don't miss that. She's wonderful. She is my boss, so I have to say that, but she is actually wonderful. She is wonderful. And I think we're going to be talking about bullying, and instances of bullying, especially maybe cyberbullying right now because of remote school and things. But if there's anything else you'd like us to talk about, or if we get a lot of people asking for one thing, we might move that to January, whatnot. So just write in, let us know. And Shannon, Nancy, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure. And it's really lovely to be here.
It saves our bacon all the time to have you here. So wonderful to have you. All right. You take care.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay. So that was sort of fun. And I'm seeing we need to do like a whole show just on diet, but we've got some news for you guys this morning. And one of the things that we were just adding before we came live onto the air is that we had covered this briefly, and I don't remember whether we did it while you were here, Nancy, but there is a young woman who was running for the state Senate in the state of Pennsylvania. She identifies herself as being both bisexual and being on the autism spectrum, and was running for the state Senate. And we are hearing this morning that she is the projected winner in the state of Pennsylvania. Her name is Jessica Benham. And of course, we're going to be reaching out to her to see if she would grace us with her presence on the show. And we want to say congratulations, and very exciting that for the first time in the state Senate in Pennsylvania, there will be someone who identifies themselves as being on the autism spectrum. I think that's really remarkable, and that it's a young woman. And yeah, I know everybody's saying, wow, and yay. We're very excited for Jessica Benham and for the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, so then
I wonder how many members of Congress are on the autism spectrum.
Well, and we don't have anybody who identifies as being on the autism spectrum, which doesn't mean that they aren't, right? Which is always a very interesting thing, right? But I think this is just the beginning for us. Her demonstrating that she not only is on the autism spectrum, but that she was identifying herself very openly as being bisexual in Pennsylvania. And that she won. I think it's going to allow more people to be more open about who they are at their core. And that if part of how people identify themselves as being on the autism spectrum I do think it's going to open the door for more people to say, yes, I identify as being on the autism spectrum, and that it's not something to be hidden. I think, in fact, it's something to be trumpeted, because I certainly am thrilled that she is going to be a voice representing, which kind of goes hand in hand with the second story that we're going to do today. But I guess the third, because that was the first story. So I'm on my top of my pile is that there is, even amidst all of this COVID madness, there is about to be, and I thought of you and Wyatt when I saw this, Nancy, because there's an art showcase that's going to be happening at Utah Valley University.
It's actually already started.
Okay, yes.
November 5th.
You're right. It's the 6th. You're absolutely right. And I love it. It's called the Super Spectrum Showcase and Soiree. And this is an annual event. Some of the art, and I don't think we have the ability to show you some of the art right now, but I thought some of the art was just beautiful, Nancy.
Absolutely
didn't you?
beautiful. The examples they showed.
And
it's all ages. It's from age, they have an artist that's 5. And then it goes on up. So,
and we want to say that this is an event. First of all, it's being held at a very special location, the Melissa Nelson Center for Autism, which is at Utah Valley University. We were covering this center when they were first getting ready to break ground, that they were going to build this new university center. And it is at Utah Valley University. And you can find out more information about the center and the art show by going to uvu.edu. But previously it was intended to be in person and has been held in person before, but because of the pandemic, it's now online. And while this is horrible and it's such a bummer, what it means is that all of you can go to it, which is a wonderful, wonderful blessing. So you would want to go to uvu.edu/autism and then /. And I have to say, Nancy, I would love to see Wyatt's work in this next year.
Yeah.
And this is one of the colleges that my son is applying to. We have dear friends who teach at this university, and I'm very familiar with this university. And so I can foresee a future where next year, Jem is a student at this college and you're visiting because Wyatt has artwork in this art show.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be lovely. I would be very excited about it. So I'm thrilled, and want to encourage people to check this out and support it. And again, if you want more information about that, go to uvu.edu/autism and then another /. You probably just could put UVU autism and it'll come up. Okay, moving on. We were talking about having a voice and why it's important to have a voice in different places. I thought this was a really interesting article, Nancy, about how important it is to have Black scientists and Black researchers in roles having to do with autism research.
Right. We've got a Spectrum News, which has very interesting articles.
I love them. I think that they're doing a really good job over there. I will say that this particular article is written by Desiree Jones, who's a graduate student at University of Texas at Dallas, along with David Mandel, who's the professor of psychiatry and pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania. And I found it really interesting as they were talking about, in light of last week, if you guys recall, we were doing a study about the fact that genetically they just started to look at the genome of individuals whose descent is from Africa, because so much of the human genome that's been mapped has been from people who are European. And that this whole 23andMe and how, like, I just did this for the first time. I just did my 23andMe, and that predominantly it's people who are of European descent who have been doing it. So most of the data that they've been collecting is about that. And they just did the first big research of a genome that is based that originates in Africa. and found over 4 million new variants that point to autism.
Right.
Or, I mean, for a week, I've just been like, how could, like, we have to stop systemic racism everywhere. And I'm going to say that, I am as blind as a person can be, and that I need to be educated constantly because I don't see what I don't see. But I found this very eye-opening, this article about how important it was, because if we don't have researchers who will be looking for this, we're going to miss it.
Right.
So I loved that it's first of all, it outlines what the issue is, what they're asking for, and then it gives all of us very specific things that we need to do. And I found this that section of the article really important about creating inclusive environments at every workplace, not just in research, and about how important it is that when you see microaggressions and when you see things to support and not always expect for it to be your teammates who are and I found this to be true, and they were saying this is very true for the autism community, but it's also true for our both people who are of color on the spectrum and off the spectrum, that we need to start living this in everything that we do. And I found it very inspirational and very enlightening, and great article.
It is a good article, and unless we can make some of these changes, we're going to see Black children underrepresented in autism research.
Well, they already are, and they're underdiagnosed, and the studies show clearly. We all know what it's like when we went to the pediatrician and we stood there and said, "I think something is going on here," and that we were poo-pooed.
Yeah,
and
they're diagnosed, and they're diagnosed at a much later age as well.
Yes. But my point is that you and I know we stood there and we were poo-pooed. And
Right.
so I go, well, autism moms are poo-pooed. Well, they're telling us in their research that if you or I had darker skin, we would have been poo-pooed longer and more stringently.
Right.
And that to me makes me nuts.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be able to be in solidarity on this and say, this is not okay on any level. And if people can't get as, excited about the idea of turning this around from a humanitarian standpoint, because I don't know about you, but it churns my stomach. I remember when Jem was diagnosed, and I realized how we were going to get help. And that we were going to be able to start services, and that the state of California was going to be able to pay for it. And I had been praying for something, help me. And I felt so lost. And then when I saw clearly that we had a path towards him being better, all I could think was, are you kidding me? The only reason why I get this is because I live in the state of California. That can't be right. How can that be? There's a mom in Kansas who feels exactly the way I do, and she doesn't get it. She doesn't get to have that prayer answered just because of where she lives.
Right.
We'll add on to that, and for me, it wasn't, because I live in the state of California, it wasn't about money, but for a lot of people, it was about money. Before California was covering it, if you didn't have enough money, your kid couldn't be treated. But now add into that, we've always known if you couldn't speak English, you were less likely to get it. And I think we've known for a long time that if the hue of the melatonin in your skin was different, then as a mom, you weren't going to get what your child needed. We just have to stop this. And it does mean having people in the roles that can bring it up. And you and I know this, Nancy, like we are women, and we have been in the room when men were talking about things and they were going to do something a certain way. But in our lifetime, there was a woman in the room, and the woman raised her hand and said, I don't think you're looking at it. I think you want to look at it this way. Now, sometimes those women were mansplained, but sometimes women dug in and said, we have a different point of view. We're seeing it differently than you are. And it's an important point of view. We cannot leave anybody behind. Not in autism. It's the right thing to do morally. It's the right thing to do for humanity, but it's also the right thing to do for all of our kids. if you don't want to know what the whole picture of autism is, we're going to miss the boat. You want to help your children, this is the right way to go. So I loved this article. I thought it was really great.
Everybody
Sometime I'd
away.
love to have this young woman on the show too, Desiree Jones. Anyway, I guess, was that all 3 stories? I think I missed a story. Oh, I think we lost Nancy. I overtalked her and she left. Okay, our last story is about how women, moms on the autism spectrum, may be passing down the gene more than dads. And I think the takeaway for me of this article was more about the fact that we're seeing this trend that sometimes one or more parent after their child gets diagnosed and it's being explained to them what autism is. I think all parents go, well, wait a second, I do that. Wait a second, I have that. Or wait a second, my husband has that. And I think it's really important for us to, I think for a lot of time, we were saying things like, well, you know, we're all somewhere on the spectrum. If you look at all of the different criteria for autism, we're hoping Nancy joins us back. But if you look at all the criteria for autism, you know, everybody has something on the criteria. And I think that that's really, really true. It's really important that we all acknowledge that you don't get a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, unless you have enough of the things, and those things have to be something that disrupts your life significantly to the point where you need support. That's really when you get the diagnosis of autism spectrum. There's Nancy.
I'm back.
We moved on to the last story, and I was just saying the takeaway for me of the last story is that, don't you find that a lot of times when people get their child diagnosed to them, that they start to go, wait a second, but you're describing me, or now you're describing my spouse. And
Right.
I think it's important to talk about it and look at it, and even to the point of we're seeing more and more, especially moms, but sometimes dads, who find themselves going to see if they qualify for a diagnosis.
Right.
And I, for one, I want to be really careful at this point and not have, I find I'm a little sensitive when people assume that they're on the autism spectrum, because I think it negates a little bit the disorder part of it. That I do think that we're all a little bit on the spectrum and that we all need a little bit of support and things, but it doesn't disrupt our life greatly. And I do think that we need to be cognizant of the difference, right? And so sometimes people will say, well, I haven't gone to get a diagnosis. I'm self-diagnosing. I think that I'm on the autism spectrum because I have X, Y, and Z. And I would encourage people to go slowly with that role. But I think that we all need to acknowledge where we're having difficulties. And if you need help, seek out and get it. And if that means getting a diagnosis, then by all means.
Right.
But I don't think it's unusual. There is an expression in the autism community that puppies don't have kittens.
Right. Right.
And, you know, our children, you know, and we can argue nature versus nurture, that sometimes our kids pick up our habits, right, of dealing with things. And sometimes our kids genetically are predisposed to different things. Jim and I definitely see in each other where the ways in which we neither one of us qualifies for a diagnosis, but you know, I have different traits. Like you know, I see that I have sensory issues, right? And he sees that I have sensory issues, but not to a degree that I can get a diagnosis of sensory processing disorder. You know, although I've had guests who tell me I should go and get officially tested for that, but and I, you know, maybe I will someday. But I think that, and maybe you can speak to this, Nancy, that, you know, I think you've been very open about the fact that you and your wonderful husband, Reed, adopted Wyatt, that he was a blessing that came to you in a different way.
Yeah.
No less meaningful, but you don't share genetic material,
Right.
but he is your child and he has grown up in your household. And he is uniquely Wyatt because, you know, he's your child. I have never, when I met Wyatt, he was, I don't know how old he was, but he was making himself a cup of coffee. And I've never forgotten that, because I didn't know any other kid that age that was making themselves a cup of coffee. But that is so Wyatt, and that is so your household. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to encourage people to be looking at that, not overreacting. And if you feel that you need a diagnosis or to have it checked, you know, it's more and more possible for adults to do that. It's not quite as difficult as it used to be. But I do think it's interesting that it's that they're seeing genetically that that it might be more from the mom than from the dad.
Right.
I don't know. I always get a little sensitive about that, Nancy. You know, I remember thinking very distinctly, because of some people in my family, as Jem was starting to be diagnosed, I remember thinking, okay, this is from my genes, not from my husband's,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling like it was my quote unquote fault.
Right.
I've been able to relanguage in that in my head, so that thought seems so foreign to me now. But I know that a lot of people get hung up in that.
Right.
You know, like, whose fault is it? And why? And there's a part in Christina Adams' book, A Real Boy, which I absolutely love. And it talks about something happens, and she finds out something statistically like this, that it's more likely to come from the mom. And her ex-husband said to her, well, yeah, I always figured he got it from you.
Uh-huh.
And it was devastating to her in that
Right.
moment. And I can remember reading that and just sobbing, because I thought, oh, I don't want it to be my fault. I really
Uh-huh.
don't look at it that way at all anymore. I don't think of it as, I really have, you know, our topic this week, Nancy, was acceptance versus contentment.
Right.
And I really do believe that I have come to complete acceptance that my child, this was the path that we were meant to be on. And I don't ever think about, well, what if my child had not been diagnosed with autism?
Uh-huh.
That's gone from the table for me. I accept it. This was our
Right.
path. This was the only way that it ever could be. And so there's nothing wrong. There's no fault. There's no blame. I'm not always in contentment with things and those things that I work on, but I fully, and it's so interesting how you can be one day not in acceptance and the next day be in
Yeah.
acceptance.
It's a process.
Yeah. And it's, I liken it to when my father died, and I was 30 years old, and I'd never had anybody that close to me pass away before. And I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. I just couldn't. I wanted to argue it. I would write things about, well, but you know, if he lived longer, and it was this whole, I couldn't accept that that was it, that my father had died and there was no more. I just couldn't get my head wrapped around it. And then a day came where it, you know, it washed over me, and I realized he's gone. He's never going to be able to be back the way that he was. And it's time to accept that. I don't have to like it, but I can't argue it anymore. There's nothing to argue. It happened. I can't go back. And then I was able to figure out how I could live the rest of my life. Because when you're not in acceptance of something, and it was the same thing for Jem. There were a lot of days that my whole day was, how can I get back to the day, the place, the time when whatever happened, and change it?
Oh, I know. I was consumed in the beginning with that thought.
Yeah.
That if I could go back and blaming myself.
Yes. And I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't make any peace with it, because you know, and I see this in other areas of my life where there's time when I'm like, I just want to do over. Can we
Right.
just rewind the tape? I want to go back. I want to do it differently. I want to look at it differently. And it isn't until I can look at something and go, okay, I can't argue that anymore. That piece of it happened. And I have to be out of the argument of that, be in the acceptance of that. And now I can figure out what to do about it, which that is that acceptance versus contentment piece for me.
Mhm.
I always feel a little strangled, like, I can't be in acceptance. And then I remind myself, acceptance doesn't mean you're happy with it.
No.
I'm allowed to not be in contentment, but I know the quicker I can get to acceptance, the better I'm going to be and the more effective I'm going to be in doing whatever it is that I'm going to do.
Right.
So anyway, so I hear you guys have been saying that this is a little bit for you as well. We are officially out of time, but I want to say that we are back next week. We've got some great guests for you. In fact, I've not told Nancy, but next week on Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, why can I not remember her last name? It's Kristen from the Autism Society of America. She was with us 2 years ago, Nancy. Lovely, lovely young woman. And I don't have her last name in front of me, but she's going to be with us next week on this show.
Okay.
So it's a big week. We're really looking forward to it. If you missed the town hall on conservatorship that we did last night, we do have the recording and we're going to be sharing that next week as well. So people will be able to tune in and check that out. So Nancy,